How you guys doing today? It's Anthony GANGI. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, I'm going big. I got some guests on. We're going to talk about investigating escapes. We're going to talk a little bit about Vicky White, Casey White, and we're also going to touch on two other escapes that occurred during a transport. We know some details, but what we're going to do today is just kind of let you guys know how transports are supposed to go. And I got my experts on. I got 3 guests with me today, so a total of 4 of us. And we're going to be fielding your questions like crazy. We're going to start the dialogue, create the momentum, and then we're going to go to the audience to help, with that momentum. Because we're going to try our best to answer the questions that we think you know, but it's best, or that we think you want to know, but it's best that we go to the audience to see exactly what it is that they want. But real quick, guys, while we get people coming in, I just want to announce my sponsors. First sponsor I have is American Military University. Guys, if you're looking for a degree, if you're looking to go back to school, check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do in the corrections profession, also very supportive of what we do on Tier Talk. Hello, everybody. Hello, Dawn. Hello, Thea. Hello, Julie. Hello, Alicia B. We're always communicating. She's making sure that I do the best for my new audience, along with my original. We're trying to build a good balance. Hello, KC girl. We also got Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And my last sponsor is Shea USA. So, guys, you don't know what Shea is. You ever go to the airport, or probably most of the prisons, it's the metal detectors. So Shea USA, CEIA, is the world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert. He's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you. And my book, Inmate Manipulation Decoded, is on the market. It is available on Amazon. What's up, Pat? Okay, so let's bring our guest in again. Today's topic is going to be investigating escapes. And we're going to kind of also let you know the difference between an escape and a walk-off. Trust and believe, guys, they're different. And I have my guest here will definitely let you know the difference between that, and it matters. So first, let me bring on Russ Hamilton. What's up, Russ? You're muted. Oh, what a way to start, Russ. You're muted. We're live right now, Russ. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Russ. You're muted. Wait, I promise you, he's muted. Hold on. Let me see if I can unmute you. You there, Russ? Hey, hold on. Let me see if I can get back up here. Gary, can you hear Russ? Everybody there?
Yes. No, I cannot hear Russ at all.
Russ, we can't hear you, Russ. So, Russ, why don't you come back in and come out? Come back in and come out. I'll introduce Gary York first. Hey, Gary, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Hello, Anthony. Thank you for having me on the show tonight. I appreciate it. I'm Gary York. I have 38 years of government experience. 10 years of that was with the United States Army Military Police, and the last 28.8 years was with the Florida Corrections System, both prison system and the county jail system. 12 of those years, I investigated crimes with the Senior Prison Inspector's Office. We investigated criminal, civil, and administrative investigations throughout the entire state of Florida, which included jails, work release centers, and probation and parole, and prisons. I also have a YouTube channel called True Prison Stories by Gary York, and I'm also a columnist for corrections1.com.
By the way, thanks, guys, for coming on. I know you're busy. Guys, if you get a chance, you like True Prison Stories, Gary has a pretty interesting channel, and he's got a good book called Corruption Behind Bars, and maybe one day we'll have him on, and he'll tell you how he investigated high-level, upper echelon violations, I guess, or corrupt acts. Okay, so I'm going to try Russ again. Okay, so Julie said she just saw your channel, Gary. So they're checking you out, guys. This is what this audience does. They're checking you out.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Russ, you there? Can we hear you now?
I don't know. Can you?
We can hear him, guys. Can you hear him?
Oh, thank goodness.
Hey, Russ, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I started my career way back in 1989 at San Quentin State Prison. Later, I transferred and promoted to sergeant. From there, I went on to become a senior correctional officer at a local juvenile detention facility. I now work in the private sector with a company that partners with a local jail and probation department doing reentry and rehabilitation work. I'm also the host of Keepers of Chaos, which is a group on Facebook dedicated toward bringing you the best in content, training, knowledge, and history of corrections.
Yes, guys, and Russ has a very good mentor system on that page, which if you're new and you're entering the field of corrections, whatever capacity, you'll be connected to someone that's a senior that's going to help you guide you through the profession. I think that's pretty cool. So thank you for what you do. And now we have the best looking of the panel coming in. His name is Steve Maynard. Steve, what's going on? What's up? What's going on? Good looking.
What's going on?
Hey, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, man. Well, my name's Steve Maynard. For those of you who do not know me, Anthony, thank you for the opportunity again tonight. I worked 15 years in corrections here in North Carolina, all the way up to administrative lieutenant, and I was on a tactical team. Actually commander of a tactical team. Done a lot of things involved with corrections and honor guard and field training and less lethal is all the fun stuff that comes along with corrections. But now I'm with Guardian RFID. I've been with Guardian since November of 2020. I'm pretty much in charge of the entire East Coast, from Maine all the way down to Florida. So instead of helping one jail, now I'm helping hundreds of jails. So that's who I am.
Well, thank you for what you do. By the way, just want to give some shout outs to everybody. Captain of my soul. Oh my gosh, Steve. So obviously looking at you already. Julie says hello, Steve, with 2 hearts.
Hello.
We got a lot of Ron. Yes, we got a lot of Duty Ron. Hello to Duty Ron people that are out here. Now you're part of the Tier Talk family. And then just one more shout out. I want to give actually a shout out to there's a young lady here, Fiber Fuzel Crafts. I think she has her own channel. She shouted out our work today. So I just want to thank her and also shout out her channel. I'm going to get a chance to look at it today, just to support the work that's being done. I believe, obviously, it takes time and effort to create a channel. So if we could support someone who supports us, trust and believe. If I will do whatever I can to make sure I learn the best about crafts, and that's where I'm going to go. All right, guys. So check this out. So I want to start the dialogue real quick with, and I'm going to go with Gary first. Someone hit me with a surprise today. So I'm going to go ahead and just mention what the surprise was. So I was in my office today at work, and someone went right back to the Casey White and the Vicky White case. And they said, Ganji, let me ask you a question because I've been watching your videos. Do you think that they can charge Casey White for an escape, knowing that, he didn't break policy? Basically, she took him out. She drove him to wherever it was, and basically in the public, he could have been kidnapped. So, could that be a game that the lawyer can play? So what I did was, right off the bat, I called Gary York, and I told Gary York, because I didn't want to surprise him with this question, because I don't think it's that easy of a question. Now, mind you guys, Gary York's experience is investigating corruption, investigating escapes, and this is what he would do. I also want to talk later on how an escape can affect the facility's morale. I do want to mention that. But Gary made some phone calls for us. He did some homework here. So I'm going to forward that question over to Gary. But basically, Gary, what would happen if the inmate or Casey White says, you know what? I didn't want to get involved in this. She actually took me against my own will, and therefore it was like she kidnapped me. What would you have to do now as an investigator to either prove that or negate that claim? You there, Gary?
All right, Anthony, I can barely hear you, but I think you're asking me if Casey White can be charged with escape because he was actually taken out by Officer White, who carried the title Assistant Corrections Director. Is that the question?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Am I low? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. Okay.
You're fine on this side, Anthony.
All right, so Gary, so the question basically is, if Casey White's lawyer decides to play the game now that Vicky has passed, and he decides to say now that hey, my client wasn't, what didn't mastermind this. Basically, she just swooped him out. He's just a victim of her mastermind. I mean, is there any way, what can you do to prove that claim or negate that claim?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, everyone, it is my opinion that he can absolutely be charged with escape. Now, his attorney and Casey White and his attorney may try to use the defense position of authority, meaning that Vicky White was an officer with a title of assistant corrections director. So a little bit of authority there she had to take him out and tell the officer, hey, I'm taking this inmate out. Don't worry about it. I'm taking him to court. And with that authority, they may try to use that defense, or they may try to say he was coerced into following her, but it's not going to fly because of several reasons. He's a capital felon inmate, and while she was removing him out of the jail, if you remember the video, he's following behind her. She's way in front, which that video actually tells me a lot of the story. She had a lot of trust in that inmate, Casey White, because you never walk in front of an inmate. You always walk behind the inmate and escort him out to the vehicle. But that's here and there now. But that video told me a big story. She trusted him 100%, and he had several opportunities. He could have walked away, said, hey, what's going on? Why are you taking me out of here? I don't have a court date today. Nobody told me I had a court date today. That's one. Then once they're on the road, he had several opportunities at a hotel, when they stopped for gas, when they stopped to switch vehicles, to call 911 and say, hey, I don't want to be charged with escape. I want to be brought in. I was taken out against my will. And then when you take into the fact that they had all the wigs and the weapon in the vehicle, and he never once tried to stop what was going on. And you, as an investigator, you would check also all of her, you would subpoena her bank records. You would subpoena her phone records. You would listen to inmate Casey White's phone calls. You would secure his cell and search everything in the cell. You would talk to other inmates that he hung around with a lot within the jail. And how do you find out who he hung around with? You talk to staff members. You get the front line involved in the investigation. Very important. The front line men and women who are the heroes that protect us every day, they have a lot of information on the front line. Long story short, yes, he can be charged with escape. That defense will not stick. And you can piece together enough evidence to show he knew very well that they were going and he was escaping. And not to mention the fact that their affair started 2 years ago, back in 2020. And when you subpoena these phone records and bank records, you want to go back 2 years. And I'll stop talking now and let somebody else talk. But I'm telling you, he can be charged with escape.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to throw this at Gary real quick. You know, if they can establish the fact that they discussed the plans for breaking him out, wouldn't that make it, at the very least a conspiracy, so that they're still going to charge him with the same thing regardless of what he tries? I think that would kind of shut that down, don't you?
Exactly, Russ. Right on the money. Exactly. Thanks for throwing that in. That's Roger on that one. And
hey, Steve, you have any comment you want to say on that at all? Are you good?
No, they covered both. They're good.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, Gary. And guys, feel free to ask questions, guys, because we're very audience fed. We're doing this show to answer your questions, but we still have some questions to ask. Don't hesitate. Put them in, because I'm going to go right to you guys. But hey, Gary, let me ask a question. So even if you prove that they had a developed relationship, so you could prove it when, they started making that connection at the jail. My thing is this: how come, I guess, when the inmate went to the jail now to go back to the jail after being at the state, if Vicky was to do the right thing, wouldn't she have to report to her higher up that she knew this inmate? And wouldn't it have been in the sheriff's best interest at that point to transfer that inmate out? One, because of her position, but two, because of the conflict?
Yes, exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up. Number one, the first question you asked, if she would have done the right thing and reported that she's too close to the inmate, we would have investigated that, whether it be your jail detective, prison inspector at a prison, or outside agency, whoever. You would investigate it to the fullest, do an impartial and fair investigation, and you would definitely transfer him away from that jail. And if you found anything that she did that was not policy and procedure and against policy and procedure in dealing with inmates, you would either file an administrative charge against her or criminal if she admits to bringing something into him. But yes, you would definitely transfer him. And now I'm going to be honest with you. I know every state works differently, but has anybody heard? I have not heard that I heard he went back to the same jail. My opinion, if we were doing it here where I'm at, we wouldn't have him back at the same jail. We would transfer him up to the next county and put him in that jail so he's not around prison staff that worked with Casey White.
And that's what they're trying to do now. Plus, to be honest with you, you really haven't, I agree with what you're saying. You really haven't identified where the flaws are. So how do you know he can't get himself out of the prison again? You know, you really haven't really identified what the concern is. And at that point, you shouldn't be sending him back to the same jail because he escaped that jail, you know? So definitely enough of a reason to work with a county jail or prison. You could work with a maximum security prison and say, hey, you know, do you mind getting this one? We'll work it out, whatever it is. But, you know, we have contracts with each other. Hey, go ahead, Russ. You're muted, Russ.
You got me, Anthony.
Yeah,
you
this is
got
gonna be
me.
a
I don't know
fun
what to say. I was going to say, I believe he's sentenced under a carjacking and a couple of armed thefts at the same time already to state prison. So, you know, I don't think it's a question of that. They should be, you know, safekeeping him no matter what. But I don't think that they even have to, you know, invoke any mutual aid thing at all there.
Well, someone actually said he heard he went to a different jail. I was reading something today, so maybe they're right, but I was reading something today that he's asking for a change of venue. So I automatically assumed that he was being sent to the jail that he had originally escaped from. Another question that came our way from, and I'll go with Steve first, if you don't mind. Hey, Steve, what do you guys think will happen to those that may have aided Casey? So we're looking at if there's maybe some aid inside the jail or the prison, but definitely more on the outside. What do you think should happen to them?
Well, what would happen in my facility if that happened? Of course, the investigations would take place. But, you know, here in North Carolina, we have safekeeping with Central Prison. So if there's inmates that are involved and we know that they had the conspiracy to help this individual escape, then they're more than likely going to go to another county or safekeeping. Is, you know, we work a contract out with Central Prison to send them there for safekeeping. If they've done it before, they're going to try to do it again, kind of thing. The staff, if there's other staff involved, which I highly doubt there is in this situation, but for the inmates, you know, get them guys or ladies away from that facility. That's my opinion. You know, here in North Carolina, they're going to safekeeping no matter what, and getting them away from that facility, those officers and the inmates.
Right. And hey, Gary, let me ask you a question. When they're doing these investigations, how important is it to separate the individuals to make sure that we don't have any influence over the integrity of the investigation? Like, how are we going to, as investigators, manage the separation of the inmates, the separation of the staff, the people that you can turn?
Well, see, that's why I don't like him being back at the same jail. We wouldn't do that here because if he has any influence over any inmates, and not that the inmate statements help a lot, but you do have to interview inmates as well as staff members when you do an escape investigation. And that's why he shouldn't be in that jail because of influence also. He should be out of that jail up at the next county or whatever, like we do here. We would move him up to Highlands County, and they may send us one from Highlands that they need to get out of there for a while. We work together with other agencies so that we don't have them in the same jail. Now, what we're going to look at is, as quick as we can, we want to interview staff and inmates as quick as we can get in there. One thing I want everybody to know, when you investigate a escape, this isn't like TV, folks, where Magnum PI does it all by himself and he solves everything, right? That is just TV. Investigating an escape involves a lot of investigators from different agencies. Here in Florida, we have the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that oversees all of the law enforcement agencies and corrections. They're going to come in. Prison inspectors are going to come in. And we're going to have Frontline help us with interviewing them. One thing I want to mention, Anthony, as far as staff being involved, I don't think any other staff member, like Steve mentioned, is going to be involved in actually helping Casey White escape. I think it's all on her. But what we're going to look at after we get them captured and back behind bars, we're going to look at complacency, checks and balances. We may have some administrative issues at hand that somebody's going to have to answer to. You know, where was master control when they're on that camera walking out? Checks and balances. I'm in master control. Hey, you're taking the inmate out for court. He's not on my court list. Let me call the court and make sure. Don't worry about the rank of Casey White, the title. You're in the master control. You're responsible when you push that button on who goes in and out. And you need to say, hey, court, do you have Casey White for court today? Why, no, he's not scheduled for court at all. Boom. Hey, Officer White, I just checked this master control. He's not scheduled for court today. Let's go ahead and put him back and come on up. People get a little worried, though. Officers get a little scared to double check because this is my supervisor. I'm scared to challenge my supervisor. Well, guess what? For those of you who aren't familiar with prisons and jails, there's a protocol for everything and policies and procedures. If you're in master control, it's your duty to double check who goes in and out of that jail and should they be going out. It's also the dorm officer's duty. When I was a dorm officer at the jail and they say we're taking inmate so-and-so out for court, I would have to document who's taking them out. And I would say also as a dorm officer, they're not on my court list. You know, and then tell master control, hey, they're taking so-and-so out of my dorm, but they're not on my court list. You have to have checks and balances to protect each other. But in this case with Vicky White, I think she used that title of assistant corrections director and some of the officers were scared to challenge her. And look what happened. It really turned into a fiasco.
Yeah, and guys, so it's good that we have an audience here that's helping us. So he did go to Donaldson, which we're very familiar with, Donaldson State Prison in Alabama, which is a smart move. Again, we may not know exactly where we went. We were trying to figure it out before the show started, but we did know what the policy would be. You didn't want him going back to the jail, which we said. You'd want him separated. And we did say, without even knowing that, the best bet would be to go ahead and send him over to a maximum security prison, work with the state at that point to have that person. And it's easy sell. This person was an escape from here. They're a risk. So at this point here, do you mind housing them? And it's a tighter level of security. And by the way, his interaction with the public is going to be very limited because he's considered still an escaper. You also have somebody that could have manipulated staff. So I would limit his contact with staff. It would be supervisor contact only, you know, for the usual stuff, whatever's needed. And, you know, if he had to do escorts, whatever, because he's a risk, you know, he's going to be a high risk inmate, high risk transport. Let me go with Steve first. Steve, when someone like Casey White gets brought back in, he has the history of an escape, history of manipulating an inmate, and we're going to start to designate him as a high-risk transport. What does that actually mean?
Well, automatically, privileges go out the window. So no phone access, none of that fun stuff that inmates get as privileges. But he's automatically going to be a 2-officer policy, maybe even 3-officer policy as big as he is. Full restraints, meaning handcuffs, belly chain, and leg irons. I mean, maybe even Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 1 hour a day rec hour. I mean, for a long, long time, you know, and I think we'll talk about in a little bit of an escape that I experienced and what we did with those guys. But that's what that's the treatment he should get. It's not mistreatment. He's still getting his hour out per se, but he's not getting the phone and the access to the tablets and kiosk and all that fun stuff anymore. He's messed up. Now he's got to pay for it.
What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Thanks, Steve. That was spot on. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we used to take a lot of high risk transports out, especially from the viewpoint of when I first started on the transportation pool. It was death row guys all the time, and so it's kind of edgy there because those death row guys actually have a lot of access to things like attorneys and courts and telephone privileges regardless. And so you just got to kind of surprise them, but you never know who else is in there watching that might place a phone call. So we had to try and do extra due diligence in that. And some of the monster inmates that we had, yeah, we would assign, 2 or 3 guys and, maybe a sergeant, maybe a chase car. And then eventually they got to the point where they decided that they were only going to have their CERT team transport those guys. So yeah, it's a big headache, but it's one that you have to do. That due diligence has to come into effect. You have to, apply every possible method that you can to keep them from successfully escaping or even trying to escape.
Yeah. So even if he did get a phone call, someone said he may have called his mother. Emergency contact may be allowed at first to kind of let you know that the inmate's been placed. At this point, they're safely here. But to be honest with you, those calls are still going to be filtered. They're still going to be monitored. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't recommend any phone calls at this time for him because, again, the thing is this, is at any point he could still have influence on the outside, and if we're looking at this investigation, there could be things that he could try to clean up. So to limit his influence on whatever it is that he needs to kind of check and balance on, I think it's ideal. I would think so with Gary as an inspector. I know that when you are investigating a matter, what you're going to ask, and if I'm correct, guys, is when the investigator is working on an investigation, they have to work with administration because administration is really the ones that have the right over those inmates. They're the ones that can make the moves happen. But don't get me wrong, we're going to work with the investigators and what they need. So once the inmate gets into our area, we now become responsible for that inmate as the administration, as the founder of the house, if you will, the owner of the house. So what would wind up happening is, I know that on my end, what I would do automatically is put the inmate in, I don't want to say the word isolation, but in some form of temporary housing where they're not around everybody. So the investigative vision can have access to that individual without that individual being influenced. But with that said, once the inmate gets into that facility and we start that clock, like I said, we put him in this investigative housing, because the inmate's going to be limited with privileges and possibly certain rights, we're on a rush to get whatever information we need to start the investigation. Is that correct, Gary?
That's correct. When I worked at the jail, we still called it isolation cell. They would be put in an isolation cell and monitored by the main control room, who could look out the window and see these isolation cells. And the main control room has direct view of Casey White if he was in isolation. And if we were in prison, we would put them in administrative confinement, is what we called it, pending investigation. But yes, you have to get them separated and start your investigation. Best thing to do, of course, is get them out of that facility they escaped from. And the quicker you start investigating, the better. I don't want to go in there 4 days later and start interviewing officers and they forget things. You want to try to get in there as soon as possible. So my boss would send on as an escape 2 or 3 inspectors. I may be going out in the field on the manhunt, teamed with the sheriff's department, the police department, and FDLE, and 1 inspector. The other inspectors may be staying back at the jail or the prison, starting to gather witness statements, logs, videos, as you saw on the news. And see, you can't do this alone. You have to work with everybody, and management, as you said, Anthony. I would go in and report to the warden what I'm there for. I would spend my whole day doing an investigation, and on the way out, I would visit the warden again, brief the warden on what I've got and what I'm going to do next. You're absolutely right, Anthony. We must communicate with the prison management and all the other agencies involved.
Yeah, now, guys, real quick, administrative segregation or restorative housing, that's not the same as isolated confinement, where I don't want to say the word isolated confinement because I know it scares people. But when you're doing the investigation, let's be honest, you are isolating that inmate because the influence, the counter influence, you want to make sure that you control the environment so you're able to get a pure investigation, pure integrity. So that's going to be different. AgSeg is more where you're putting the inmates there for problematic reasons. But even in AgSeg, if I had an investigation going on with the inmate in AgSeg, I'm going to pull them out. And then they're going to go to some form of investigative housing because, again, guys, you have to have them isolated from either influence a potential witness or being influenced themselves. One thing about the investigative division where there's a bit of a balance here, and a lot of people forget this, is that in the effort of the investigation, don't forget, Casey White could be the person directly involved, but he could also be a witness. So the investigator has to treat that with objectivity, and they also have to protect him to some extent. They have to make sure that he's in an environment where he can't be influenced to not tell the truth. Would you, Gary, when you're investigating this, you have to have no bias, right? I mean, you have to look at this objectively, correct?
Absolutely. As my boss always told us, to all the investigators on our monthly meeting, we are going to let the chips fall where they may. We are not going to make evidence. We're not going to take away evidence. We're going to let everything fall where it may. And if the investigation ends up inconclusive or unfounded, that's the way it is. We don't force things to happen. We go with what is happening and what tangible evidence we have, and other evidence like love notes written from an inmate to from, let's say Casey White wrote love notes like a lot of inmates do, and we find them, to to Vicky White. We'll have that as evidence. We'll have phone records as evidence. We'll have bank accounts as evidence. Photos. We've had officers and civilian staff, unfortunately, get involved with an inmate and bring in a photo of them in a bikini, and even less. It happens, but Anthony, unbiased all the time and let the chips fall where they may.
Right, and I want to get on something else too, guys. We always keep on talking about the position of authority of that individual and her influence over staff. So I had a dialogue with somebody today, and it was a good dialogue, and we talked about, the position of a subordinate staff next to someone that could be corrupt. But the thing here is this, when it comes to all that, is that we still have an expectation. Again, we're not loyal to the person. We're loyal to our sworn oath, which is to protect and serve. If at any point that we feel that the supervisor has strayed, it's our job to hold them accountable regardless of our rank, because if they're committing something unlawful, they just pretty much gave up their rank. So you don't have any control of me because you may be compromised. And one of the things that we have in corrections, even in a hostage situation, is that if a person of rank at any point is compromised, their authority is gone. They don't have any authority. And believe it or not, that's a good thing, because if an inmate decides to get motivated, I'm going to go after the administrator because the administrator can run this facility. I'm going to take this administrator hostage. It's a foolish move, because the moment you take me hostage, I don't have the ability to give command. So I believe that also falls into play where if you're doing something that's unlawful, I have to step up. I have to say, you know what? That's not going to happen. Let me call my immediate supervisor. It's not easy to speak truth to power, but there's nothing easy in anything related to corrections. But if you don't do that, you will be held responsible as if you're the person doing it themselves. So you have one person who's actively doing it. They get the main charge, but you could get negligence for not stepping up and doing your duty. What's your thoughts on that, Russ, and then Steve?
Yeah, just going back a little bit to what, Gary was saying there. Yeah, this individual, Vicky White, yeah, there was probably potential situations there with regards toward people, not wanting to challenge her authority. But at the same time, don't forget that other angle of it. There may be some in there that just because she is over them might just assume, well, she must know what policy is. She must know what she's doing. I mean, she's earned this, high rank, even for a small jail. And so If you don't know what policy is, if you don't know what procedure is, then you're going to, default to that person above you and assume that they know best. And so there's no reason for you to challenge anybody.
Steve, what's your thoughts on that? Steve, have you ever had to tell no to a supervisor?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, respectfully, yes. I mean, if it's not policy, then I'm going to have a little pushback in a respectful manner. I mean, it is what it is there. But, that's why from day one, my dad said, learn policy, learn procedure, and that I tell every FTO that, tell your staff, make them learn policies, procedures, general orders, and all that fun stuff. But I've had situations where I've told supervisors, look, man, this isn't the right choice. Let's do this. And most of it was tactical encounters, whether it's cell extractions or, hey, we need to use less lethals on this individual, stuff like that. When they want to stack a team up and just run in there and get them. So different situations. But yes, I have told supervisors, no, I don't think we should do it this way. Let's do it this way. It is what it is. And I think at the end of the day, they say, hey, thanks for telling me that. And next time we'll try to do something different instead of doing it my way. We'll look at other options that we have here. But when it comes down to this, I really truly believe, like Gary and Russ said, with her rank, and maybe other officers just assumed that she knew what she was doing. She was doing it. It's all sketchy to me anyway, when you got a small female like that escorting a guy that's as tall as my gazebo here, and with charges that he had. That right there blows my mind, that even anyone, that's not policy procedure. That's just some people not paying attention and being complacent with their everyday duties and saying, yep, she's taking them out, whatever. That it just blows my mind, honestly.
Yeah, and I want to mention something. Unsolved, where is she? Unsolved crimes. She goes, Anthony, how do you prevent the he said, she said that may ensue through that type of whistleblowing scenario? I think a lot of people are afraid of being targets, so maybe less likely to act. Can I say something real quick, and then we'll go through, because I think the panel may want to discuss something on this too. So we have that thin blue line code, whatever people, what is it, the code of secrecy, whatever it is. I want to tell you why that exists. Believe it or not, it doesn't exist to protect corruption like a lot of people think it does. It's not the case. It's really about being a social outcast. So I want to share something with that. A little off topic, but a little bit of fruit for you, if you will. So we're taught to be a family. I mean, think about the academies that a lot of us go through, where, how the academy works is that you're meant to hate the instructors, believe it or not, at the very beginning, because they want to build like an us versus them that brings us together as recruits. So when you go in, they're all on you, they're yelling at you, but it's all a facade. It's all a show meant to bring us together. They're meant to connect you like family. So what happens is, it does take a strong person to step up when they see something is wrong, because to them, it's not so much about the law enforcement side. It's more about, this guy's my brother, this guy's my sister, or this woman's my sister. It's like turning against my family. It's no different than, you're at home and your brother does something illegal, or your father, and having to turn them in. I mean, that's how close we are to each other. And the reason being is because if we're not close to each other, we start second guessing saving each other's lives. I mean, think about being in a prison, and you have a code. I'm not running to save, my brother and sister because I'm getting paid to do it. Because at the end of the day, no money is going to be worth the shit that you got to run into. I'm running into it because that's Steve. I need him on another show of Tier Talk. Or that's, that's Russ. Russ can handle himself. I'll walk to that one. But the thing is, guys, you're running to the code because you're motivated, because that person in there, first off, that's your family, and they would do the same for you. So when you go ahead and step up and you do the right thing and you do it alone, that's a scary situation, because then when you're walking in that prison and the other inmates are eyeing you down, whatever it is, something happens, do people got my back? So we always encourage on this channel the support needed to push people forward, which means that if you want me to do the right thing, don't make me feel like an outcast for doing it. That's the key. All you need is one person to guide that person through. It really is. It's one person, but basically none of us want to protect the corrupt act. We're just more nervous about being that outcast. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not trying to minimize that. But when you go to attack a problem, you have to know why it exists and not assume that you know. If I go ahead and go after an officer saying, well, you're not doing the right thing because you're just going to protect officers from being corrupt, they become more resistant because that's not the reason. You know what that officer needs? I know what you're going through. Gary, as an investigator, if you have a corrupt officer, you don't go in there right away. You try to coach them to do the right thing because I think you're aware of the pressure that they face when they go right back on the floor for possibly whistleblowing, correct?
Correct. It's a very tough spot to be in. But I always tell officers, you know, administrative investigation, criminal investigation, don't lose your job for failure to report. Now, every state has different things they use for administrative and criminal. We have what we call failure to report. So if I'm asking you, did you see Officer so-and-so do such and such? And you got that pressure on you, like, I don't want to be the outcast, and you tell me no, but I have a video laying right there on the table that shows you seeing this take place. I've seen some good officers, honest officers, lose their job for denying they saw something, failure to report something they saw. In today's jails and prisons, folks, with technology, not everywhere yet, but it's coming. We've got cameras everywhere and corners everywhere. And you don't want to get caught up in that mess. I tell people, don't lose your career over what somebody else did. We've got to lose that stigma, you know. We've got to remember, I got to worry about me now. It's my family that I'm putting food on the table for. I'm not going to lose my health care, my dental care for my family. I'm not going to lose my paycheck that puts a roof over my family, you know, over their heads. I'm not doing that for you.
Right. And guys, I want to mention something, guys. I like what the person said about integrity. It does, guys. It's not easy to do the right thing. Sometimes it's not. And for the people that do, they must be supported. I just want people to know it's not always as black and white as people may think it is. And I'm not giving people an excuse for doing the wrong thing. I just know that if we address it and we want to correct it, we can't correct it from our perspective, thinking that we know why they're hiding it. Because in the end, even as admin, when we want to motivate someone to do the right thing, the first thing we got to think about is how do we protect this person from being retaliated? But also, in an effort to protect that person, how do we not treat them like they're being punished? Because my first thing is, if I need this person to talk, should I send them to another facility? But then they're being rerouted. You know, now I'm making it inconvenient for them to tell the truth. So it becomes very hard because there's an effort to, one, protect the individual that needs to say something, but two, to not make it feel like they're being punished. So it's not as easy as people may think. What's your thoughts on that, Russ and Steve? You want to comment on that?
Yeah, there's, you know, this is a thing, you know, we get this, you know, so-called code of silence or green wall or whatever it is. And originally, sometimes that can get started for what are ostensibly good reasons. Sometimes we see good staff retaliated against by some administrators, and then we paint a generalization on all administrators, and then people decide that, hey, it's a good idea to, you know, just, you know, have a solid, you know, front to the enemy, as it were. But then the next thing we know is we have some people that take advantage of that, and, you know, maybe they do something completely wrong, thinking that their bad behavior is going to be covered over, and then it becomes an unwritten, tacit expectation, and that's how we have the root of the problem take place, because we start out with one thing that's ostensibly has some reasons, even if it's not necessarily good, and it gets, you know, melded in something completely different. And it's just exactly like those youngsters in the gangs, right? Those youngsters in the gang, they get you know, all that propaganda thrown at them. Oh, we're doing this to protect our territory. We're doing this to protect our race against some other bad race. And since there's some violence and there's some little bit of truth to that, they swallow it whole hog. And then they come back around and they start to think that anything goes. And so that's the difference between having an oath and just having, you know, something that can be melded into anything you want, where you're not answering to a higher power.
And Steve, what's your thoughts on that real quick? Because I have a question from Alicia after your thoughts.
Yeah, to make it quick, you know, like you said a while ago, you know, I'm my brother's keeper kind of thing. You know, I'm going to be there for you. I know you're going to be there for me. However, there's a thing called Garrity rights when this investigation starts, and I have to tell the truth. If I know something's going on and I'm being recorded and I have to sign this paper saying you will be truthful or else you will be held accountable, then I got to tell the truth. I got to be truthful. I'm not here to burn another officer, but I got a career. I got a family to take care of. If I'm untruthful in this investigation, then it's me and my family that's going to suffer. So, you know, there's a time where you got to do your job. I mean, that's the integrity of the job. You learn about your ethics, during your ethics class in your basic training, whether it's 8 hours or a week, whatever long it is, you go over that. And I think that honestly should be a yearly mandate, honestly, to refresh some minds. But that's just my thought. I know you got to go to the next one. So yeah,
no, I think it's spot on. One of the questions that Alicia said, and let me click it real quick. It's a great question. The sheriff stated he wasn't going to change anything. How does the panel respond to that? So I'll go first, then we'll go right up the panel. So here's what bothers me with that. What bothers me with that is that I don't want to. If I'm in leadership, if I know something's happened, and obviously at this point, when you're looking back, you know where the failures were. I hope you know because everybody else seems to know. So you better know because you're the closest to it. Plus, you have the most resources that can give you the answers that you need because the investigative division, some of them are going to answer to the sheriff directly. And the other thing is you don't want to wait for stuff to be discovered because it like lacks integrity. Like I'd rather, if I know something happened at my facility that I have to correct, I'm not going to wait for that to be discovered and then go ahead and let the public figure it out because someone else brought it up. I don't have faith in you anymore because some of these mistakes that you're going to have come across, there's no way you as a leader would not know of these things if your boot's on the ground. So to sit there and say that after an escape has occurred, that you don't think that there's nothing to fix, I have a problem with that because right off the bat, we may have a culture that requires retraining. You know, I mean, you have a PREA violation right there. A single female taking out a maximum security inmate. So if that right off the bat doesn't say that you have to change certain things, and the sad thing is, guys, even if his policies are correct, have you been doing what the policies say, or have you been just committing to practices just to get by? Because I'm going to tell you something, guys. We have a lot of understaffed facilities that policies say this, but they don't have the staffing to do it. So what happens is they wind up just getting by and doing it understaffed, and nobody's taking, concerns. Oh, it's just another day until something happens. And then when they go back and check, it's like, well, you never made a complaint about it. Well, I thought people knew. No, it doesn't work. I'd be annoying on that post every day. It says 2 people. Here I am again, day 36, and I'm by myself again. There's no way you can look at even the small glimpses that we've seen and say that there's nothing that needs to be addressed. My thing about this is that I'm concerned about the fact that maybe he's saying that, and I could be wrong, because if he admits fault by saying something has to be addressed, all of a sudden, everybody looks at the agency. Now, here's the funny thing, guys. When something like this happens, because we'll get into how escape affects the morale of the facility, I want you to be mindful for something. Everybody's in survival mode here. So you may not be able to trust everybody and what they say because everybody's ass is on the line. So when everybody goes to say something, they're not saying what's in the best interest for the public. They're going to say what's in the best interest for themselves to save their ass. So I'll go with Steve first and work your way down. But Steve, you saw all these videos. If the sheriff said that, hey, you know what, there's nothing really needs to be changed here, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's crazy, honestly. Yes, a lot should be changed, including policy and how you escort individuals. And just from the beginning of the escort all the way through the getting in the Sally Port, that was all unsafe and wrong. But something's got to change there with the facility. I mean, number one, female escorting a male, the way this was going down, going out of the facility, what could happen? We never, ever sent the opposite sex without a partner with the inmate, whether they were going to the mental health facility or the hospital or whatever. We always sent the same sex and maybe the opposite sex or 2 of the same sex. So that policy, if it's not in their policy, it should be changed, number one. But just the entire situation. I mean, I could go for hours on that, honestly, about what needs to be changed, what should be changed, and they should be reactive in this right here. This is a perfect opportunity to change a lot of things instead of just brushing it off. I mean, you got to swallow your pride. Okay, your agency made a mistake. Let's fix it, point blank.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because the funny thing is, guys, is that, and before we get to Russ, so you have the preventive measures, but now you're in reactionary mode. And believe it or not, reactionary mode can become preventive. The sad thing is, guys, and Russ is going to get into this. This is Russ's area of expertise. Russ is going to give you a quote about complacency, and he's going to kind of explain it from our perspective, but hopefully in a way that you guys can understand it. But my biggest concern is corrections, is when complacency becomes such natural habit that's what we're teaching the new people. And next thing you know, what you have is you have bad practices teaching bad practices, and people have stretched so far away from the norm that something like Vicky White taking out a male inmate doesn't even make them second guess anything, because it's just another day in which this is done. And then the sad thing is, guys, when you tell these people, hey, how do you justify what was done? They don't even know it's bad practice. Like, well, the policy says. Policy doesn't say that. Well, when I was trained, they did that. It doesn't matter. They didn't train you on policy. They trained you on bad practice. Russ, what's your thoughts on complacency? What's that definition? And can you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, so my little saying on complacency is situational awareness perceived but not achieved. And that's simply a belief that you understand what your situation is at that given moment, and you've put yourself in a position where that belief isn't founded on any sort of prima facie evidence. You don't know what's going on around you, and you have not achieved situational awareness. And this is just another one of those cases, and this kind of feeds into what I've wanted to say about Vicky all along. This is everyone is focusing on what this inmate said to her to get her to fall in love, to throw away her career, to become a wanted criminal, and that's all well and good. That is part of the conversation that we need to have about manipulation. But the bigger part here is, what in the world did Vicky say to staff that saw this during that 2-year period? How did she cover up? What was her demeanor that allowed people to not even question it? Oh, that's just Vicky. That's just the way she is. Is that what it was? Or, hey, that's Vicky. She's the assistant deputy director or whatever she was, and so we're not going to question her. Or, that's Vicky. She must know best. So she did most of the manipulation, whether it was active manipulation or passive manipulation. And that's how we ended up seeing multiple levels of security breached and him being brought outside the wall. So, just looking and saying, well, he's an expert inmate manipulator isn't enough.
Yeah, and by the way, well, first let me get Gary's thoughts on this first. And I have a great question from Julie, and a question that we could have fun with. But before we get, let me, Gary, answer that question first. I want to, Gary, what's your thoughts on that last question about, where was it? Hold on. From Unsolved, I think it was Unsolved Crime.
Yes. The sheriff throughout this whole thing never impressed me at all. And actually, when I watched the sheriff answer questions about what he wants to do, what's going on, I myself felt he was complacent. I felt his answers were very complacent. I felt like he didn't have a handle or a grip on the jail. And then to say that you don't want to change anything, if I was a sheriff, I would want to say, listen, we made a terrible mistake here, and I want to bring a team into my jail from anywhere other than this state, and I want them to go through my jail and do an inspection and give us tips and things that they see we're doing wrong. See, when you own up to your mistake, you're actually showing that you're a bigger man. Okay, the sheriff would be showing that he has integrity. He's a bigger man. Man, this guy isn't worried. Somebody said it earlier. I guess he's not worried about re-election. He must be on the way out or not care if he's re-elected. He needs a complete oil change for that jail.
Yeah, you know what's funny, guys? I found out this, and I'm sure it works. you know, going into a position, being humble, knowing that you're not perfect, know that you're bound to make mistakes. I think there's more respect for someone that steps up, takes onus for what happened, because again, it's their team, takes full responsibility, and then we have more trust in their efforts to clean it up because they admitted it, as opposed to someone who says it doesn't need to be clean. There are no concerns when you obviously see it. So the question is, I'm not looking for someone that is waiting for us to discover a concern and then, oh, now I trust you to do something. No, I'm going to trust you when you mention it first. Admit your vulnerability first so I know I can trust you, not having us discover it. That's where the question of integrity comes into play. Hey, there was a great question, and I think it came from Julie. I'm pretty sure it came from Julie. Yeah. I like this question, but I'm going to go backwards now. I'm not going to go first. I want to answer this at the end. So I'll start with Gary and work my way up. Do you think Vicky was observing patterns in her fellow officers and knew who to manipulate? So I'm going to go with Gary first. Gary, what's your thoughts on that?
Yes, Julie, that's a great question. You know, I've investigated many, many staff-inmate relationships in a 12-year period, not just in uniform, but, you know, counselors, teachers, prison librarian, what have it. And absolutely, she was watching and observing not only fellow staff members, but she was observing other inmates. She was looking for when the weakest link was on duty, in my opinion. Why do I say that? Because after we've completed an investigation, one question I always like to ask the male officer in a female prison or the female officer in a male prison is, what made you do this, and to get their answer. And then I also would ask them, how did you get away with it? Not all would give me that answer, but some would, and they would explain. I know certain times of the day we're short-staffed and everything is going on, feeding. In the jail, you got meds going on, you got the attorney booth. I know at that time of the day, nobody can be around there but me and the inmate. Or I know I have a weak officer on duty that sits there and plays with their phone or is on the computer doing something and not watching the dorm. So, Julie, I absolutely agree with your question, or like your question. Yes, they're always, if they're involved with an inmate, they're always watching and observing both the inmates and the staff and looking for the right moment and the weakest link.
Yeah, I like that, because Julie's question also talks about it kind of covers it too with the abuse of power, because for her, it could be easier to manipulate staff because of her position of power. Hey, Russ, what's your thoughts about Julie's question?
Yeah, I think it's probably true to an extent. I think there was a point though at which she reached, and obviously, you know, when she was going to, you know, fake this whole, you know, outside transport thing, that it was simply go time. And so, you know, once they reached that critical mass, you know, she just kind of had to do that in front of whatever staff member was there. But I don't think it was necessary for her to like look at patterns of specific individuals. I think that, you know, it was broke down in their culture from the very beginning in that horrible phrase that I so often have to repeat. Well, we've been doing it that way. And so you get enough people that, you know, aren't on the ball, that don't understand, that are complacent in what they're doing. And you don't have to, you know, pick the pattern of one individual, because every individual has fallen into that same pattern. And it becomes, you know, broad-based institutional complacency rather than individual complacency.
You know, and what's your thoughts on that, Steve, as well?
No, I agree with what Gary and Russ said. And I was actually thinking about, you know, how guarding RFID helps with tracking these individuals and keeping up with where they're at all times. And it's about knowing where your folks are at all times. And like, if this guy's on the court docket, why is he going to court? Or, you know, or whatever. And it just blows, this whole situation blows my mind, honestly. I go to a lot of jails, and I can only, I'm trying to imagine, I met the sheriff at the Alabama Sheriff's Conference, and a great guy. But when it's time for, when something like this happens, something needs to happen internally, you know, whether it's like Gary said, bring in outside folks to say, hey, look at my agency, reevaluate what's going on, reevaluate my policy and procedure, whatever. But something needs to be done, because if it's my sheriff And he says, oh, everything's good. We're not changing anything. And I'm an officer working in that jail. I'm thinking, man, this guy doesn't have our back. This happened already once. It's probably going to happen again because nothing's changing. Who can I trust? All this fun stuff now that are going through just line officer and maybe even supervisors' minds that I can only imagine. So there's so much that I could say right there to piggyback off what they said, honestly.
Yeah.
Can I interject something here real quick? One of the things that we see a lot of the times is when something like this happens is there's at least, one part of the human link that breaks down. And I know that some of us can sometimes be mistrustful or distrustful of technology. But I think that, what Steve said there is, spot on.
Yeah.
If we have technology backstopping what we're doing, maybe something like that gets found out, where when it's just, someone, NCR or carbon copy of things, and they already have the authority and can do what she did, maybe something like what Guardian has would have stopped something like that, or at least tipped somebody up to be able to stop it.
Yeah, can I add something too? And by the way, guys, Guardian's very supportive of what we do in corrections, but they do have technology that aids the profession. What I like about them is they're building it from a frontline perspective. They're seeing what we need and really connecting with us, not for the money, but because they're motivated. Stuff that they're involved in is truly, really a benefit for us. Guys, they sponsor me to just pretty much do this. There's no greater love for that. And I want to mention something because 616 brought up a good point. So when you're in management, and I think we covered the Vicky White part just now, the question from Alicia, which was a question from Julie, I think it was. Phenomenal question, by the way. I do think her position of influence helped her with that. But I want to mention something, guys. So if I'm an administrator, right, and I'm held directly responsible for that facility, when people come in to check the rights and wrongs of the facility, I wind up, because my pride's connected to that, or I'm so concerned that I'm going to lose a job, I don't give people an honest look. I'm giving people a look of what they're going to expect. And it tends to be all lies, because the sad thing is we know deep down inside, that's not how the facility's operating every day. That's why when you do an audit, you start to question some of the staff alone. And the first thing you do is you offer them protection. Hey, I'm going to ask you some questions, but be advised, whatever you say on this interview cannot be used against you, because you have to motivate the staff to say the right thing. And maybe the question would be, I noticed there were 2 officers on the post today. Is that how that's done every day? When people from the outside coming in, exactly what 616 was saying, they're never going to see the truth, because the person is not going to want to show them the truth, because they're directly responsible for how that facility looks. It's very rare where you're going to get a supervisor or a leader, I'm going to actually say a leader this time, who's so connected to their front line that they know they have to fix their flaws. And when they invite somebody in, I'm going to show you how we're running it. But this is what I have to do at an exhausted effort. Most of the time, what you get is someone that's going to hide every problem, try to handpick the staff that you're going to talk to, and just sweep everything under the rug. So it's very hard to get an honest perspective of what's happening, because there's a lot of factors that can influence that truth. Would you agree with that, Gary?
Yes. And, you have to influence your people as a leader to do the right thing. And you have to set the example as a leader to do the right thing. I was a staff sergeant in the United States Army. The rank did not make me a leader. I can have all the rank I want on my shoulder. That does not make me a leader. I have to prove to my crew that I'm a leader, and, and show them that I will back them up when they're right 100%. And if they're wrong, I will counsel them and get them on the right track. But I have to influence them to do the right thing. And in this jail that we're talking about tonight, it just seems like they're missing everything. Lack of leadership, lack of policy and procedures, complacency, like Russ explained, no technology, like Steve explained. They definitely need some influencers in there to get them back on track. And they need some leaders in there. And they may have to rebuild from the bottom up.
Yeah, guys, I want to ask one more question that's going to be tough but I want to ask it now before we move on to the 2 escapes that just happened on the transports. And guys, by the way, guys, so we try to look up information. We're still building our connections to do so. But having said that, we're going to talk in general of how things should be done. And then later on, when you watch things, you can have more informed questions of why couldn't they do it that way? Why couldn't they do it that way? Because we don't want to falsely, say something that's not true. So I may read something shortly, but then what we're going to do is we're going to tell you what's the best way to do something. And then when you hear it, you can see if that applies to what it is that you've been reading. So just to educate you guys a little bit. But granted, if you guys know information, toss it in here because we're driven. I'm still learning how to do this. To be honest with you, I'm learning to try to figure out what it is that we have to have answered. The audience here is an extremely intelligent audience. Obviously, they have to be. It's Duty Ron's channel. I mean, if you ever watch his show, his stuff is very well researched. I mean, the guy is just spot on. And then obviously making the difference that he does. So the audience that we have is going to be a reflection of that influencer. So having said that, we could always use a little help with that. But we will give you what we do know in regards to our area of expertise, the policies, the procedures, because even before at the beginning, we kind of was a little concerned about the jail he was at, but what did we say? This is what we would do. So we were still on point. We just didn't know what they had done. But I want to ask something before we switch over to those 2 transports. Now, guys, this is a tough question, but the reason why I want to ask that is because all of us on this panel, all of us on this audience, I want to know that we do see Vicky as a person. So with that said, and I'm going to start with Steve, Russ, Gary, and myself. Do you feel sorry for Vicky at any point during this, or in your mind, is she strictly a criminal? All right, and that's a hard question to answer, but I want to get it out there to just see what people think. And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer here. I can't tell you how you feel, and no one should judge you on how you feel. But I'm curious to see if people in this profession, may have a hate because how it can make this profession look and how that falls back on us, or, is this person just human and human makes mistakes, but do we really judge people by, being human? We all make mistakes, or is it really the quality of the mistake that matters? If it was a lesser consequence, would you be able to forgive her more? So Steve, very tough question, but I'm curious. Can you find it in your spot as a professional, as a human, to forgive someone like Vicky for the choice that she made?
Yes. I've known very good officers to make mistakes. Female officers actually sleeping with male inmates. Good officers making stupid mistakes. Vicky made a stupid mistake. Manipulated, deceived, whatever you want to call it. It was a big mistake. Maybe there was something wrong mentally with her that nobody knows about. There's so many things that honestly none of us know about what she was going through to make her do this. Clearly a veteran in corrections, well liked, high ranking. So she was doing something right somewhere, right? But yeah, people make mistakes. Sometimes they're a lot bigger like this, helping someone escape and then going to the extent they did and then committing suicide because she knew there was no way out of this. It was suicide or go to jail where she has worked in a jail. I don't want to go to jail after working in a jail. I don't think I have in my blood to be able to kill myself, but she knew there was no way out of this, and that was her out. Maybe it was already planned. If I don't have a way out of this, then I'm going to kill myself. But like I said, I could forgive her. I guess that's the Christian in me. I could forgive her. She made a mistake. I forgave the officers I worked with who made big mistakes too by sleeping with inmates or bringing drugs in. Yes. Short answer. Yes, I can forgive her.
All right, and fair, guys. By the way, we're at 340 people in here, so this is definitely something that they're interested in. I'm gonna go with Russ. You're muted.
You got me again.
Come on, Russ. You're
I was
embarrassing
thinking
me here.
because I
You're
was thinking
embarrassing.
about that, and then I was wrestling with everything that Steve was saying there. But so in my mind, the way that I would approach this is not to drop down to that euphemism of saying that word mistake. You know, it was intentional on her part, and yeah, I think that there was probably an emotional component and a mental health component, and all of those things that in a court of law she might use to mitigate it if she was getting a sentence, which she's not. But here's the thing. Every single one of those U.S. Marshals was put at grave risk. Every single one of those individuals at that jail as this escape was unfolding was put at grave risk. We don't know at that point whether he had a gun, she maybe had one on her going in there. And so the stakes were so high, and not a mistake, but, you know, a conscious, intentional effort to breach that security that I don't feel like I would forgive her. I do feel sorrow for her family, because I know for her family this came out of left field. I feel sorrow. I do feel sorrow for the people that worked with her, that were her peers, and those above her, and those that worked for her, because I think that they misguidedly let a lot of things slide. But when you go in there and you swear the oath, you don't swear that you're going to do everything 100% of the time and that you're not going to make any mistakes. You swear that you're going to uphold the oath. And so that's where the break is, for me, is her breaking that oath and putting others in such extreme jeopardy.
Yeah, and I think that's a very balanced answer. Duty Ron said Vicky White made a choice to become a criminal once she broke out of murder. I know, and it's funny because it's the consequence of the action that makes us feel a bit conflicted. I had someone that reached out to me who does feel conflicted over this because they know Vicky as a person. And I said, well, no one can tell you how you're supposed to feel. You know, I remember an officer that took his own life, but also committed a murder before he did that. And a lot of people didn't know how to feel about that because they loved him as a man, but then he also had committed a murder. And I said, well, you don't know the murderer. You know the man, and you have to feel what you have to feel. What's your thoughts on that, Gary?
I'm going to give the exact same answer I gave in one of my videos a few days ago, right after we found out she was deceased. I'm very angry, or I was very angry with her, and I wanted her to sit in a courtroom and be sentenced to prison. I wanted her to get a lot of years of prison time for placing so many people's lives in jeopardy. I did, and I also said the same thing as Steve and Russ in that video. I do believe there might be some mental issues, but I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I think mental could play into it. Manipulation plays into it. Complacency plays into it. But I'm very angry with her, and I wanted her to actually be alive to get sentenced and go to prison, but that didn't happen. Now, the human side of me, committing suicide, you know, that I do feel bad about that. I don't feel good when anybody commits suicide. I do have a heart, even though it may not seem like it at times, but I do have a heart. So I do have some sympathy for her committing suicide. But my answer is I wish she was alive to take her punishment.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's where it comes down to. Someone asked me, do we think she was suicidal? Can I tell you something? Just an opinion here, because we had Toby Dorr on, and Toby Dorr was talking about at one point her father was dying. She thought she was sick. So at that point, you know, she was just, who cares about consequences? I'm going to live my life. I mean, this could have been a bucket list for her. You know, maybe she could have decided, you know what, I'm going to go and do this. I don't expect to come out live at the other end of this. You know, so I'm going to put my relationship, because there was a component of they were going to have sex. She bought sex toys. So this could have been a final act of desperation, and she knew she wasn't going to return. So maybe she felt that she had a miserable life, and maybe she was suicidal. We don't know. But maybe this was the last-ditch effort, and this was going to be the moment. You know, I'm going to do this moment. There was never no turning back. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm just going to take myself out, because at the end, this is what I want. It's my bucket list. You know, so we don't know. See, that's another thing, guys. when you commit to something like this and you know what the consequences are, I know she would know, regardless of how manipulated you are, you would know what the consequences are. You have to value those consequences with your life. You know, I know a lot of people will walk in and look at an inmate and say, I don't know why you keep coming back here. This is a jail or a prison, and what are you doing? But then if you ever look at how they live on the streets, the jail and the prison's a step up. You know, it literally is a step up for them. So when we look at the choices people make, and we obviously see these crazy consequences, the first question I think about is, how do they value their life to where this is a better option? You know, why am I going to make that option? What is it that I'm trying to escape from or that I don't want? And again, when I say this, guys, it's not to minimize someone's role in what they've done. It's just an understanding of why people do it so it doesn't happen again. I wrote a book, again, on manipulation, because I believe that there is a game to this. I believe that there are people that could be a victim to the game. Now, if I just judged it based on the outcome, then yes, you're a fool. You helped an inmate escape, you're a fool. You brought in a phone, you're a fool. You brought in drugs, you're a fool. But what I'm ignoring is the process that caused the person to shift. And if I sit there and say, well, they're a fool because of that process, I couldn't believe they fell for that, then you have no idea how smart these inmates could be. Because at the end, what we know is that we know it's an inmate. We see it as an inmate. She doesn't. She doesn't. You know, somewhere along the line, her loyalty switched, her perspective changed, and then there's a process behind that. And I would like to think that someone that has gotten that far up, you know, literally has moved that way up all the way, I like to think that they know those consequences like you wouldn't believe. But when you start to think that, you know what, something happened in my life, and now I'm open to this relationship, the value switches. You know, where the value for that person becomes a lot more than the sworn oath to what now becomes a bunch of strangers and obstacles. Hey, guys, we got Duty Ron. What's up, Duty Ron?
Anthony, how are you? Russ, Steve, Gary, nice to meet you guys.
Well, it's okay. Hey, got to get your opinion on this, Duty Ron. Do you see a criminal, or do you feel sorry for her at any point?
Yeah, I kind of I'm torn between forgiveness for a fellow brother or sister, but once you step over that line, and when she made the conscious decision to break a murderer out of her facility, it's the point of no return. And in my eyes, it's the worst thing for us as professionals is to have somebody cross into that criminal element. It leaves a stain for us for the rest of our time, and it makes the job that much more difficult to do. So I say to myself, I do want to humanly, in my heart, I want to forgive her, but as a professional, I can't. And I think the sheriff said it well in Indiana. He said, we treat her, once she did what she did, we treat her just as a criminal. Because the news reporter asked him, how does your men and women feel about pulling Vicky White out of that car? And he said, we don't feel any different. We feel like she's one of the criminals that we've taken in, one of the many. So it's unfortunate, and that's the stance that I take. I used to hate when a fellow NYPD officer would, go to the dark side, as we would say. It's never a good look for our profession, and it makes our jobs difficult.
Yeah, and by the way, that's spot on, because there is, guys, I want you to know something. There is conflict here. I mean, there are going to be some people that are going to see the outcome of what she did, and the judgment becomes automatic, because of the risk that she posed, the violation of the sworn oath. And I want to, before I switch to the transports, there's one more other thing I want to mention, the morale. And I think Ron could also get on this too, because there's always an escape from custody. Whether it's from our end of the facility or a local police department or a state trooper, whatever it is. But an escape has a very bad impact on the morale of a correctional facility, because believe it or not, guys, that's the lowest of the low for us, because we're trusted to keep them inmates in. And the moment someone violates that trust, it destroys the trust that people have in us to be effective at our job. And I'll start first, and I'll go backwards this time. I'll start with Gary and then work our way down to Ron. But Gary, when a facility goes to an escape, first off, how does that affect management? How does that affect the trust? How does that affect staff morale?
This greatly affects the staff morale at that jail because they've been in the news for the past, what, 2-3 weeks. And it's not good news. It's bad news. One of their officers, as Ron said, went to the dark side. And that's not what we want. It's tainting the image of the good, honest, hardworking officers. Now, let me say something. We've talked about this jail looking like it's complacent, looking like it needs a lot of policy and procedure overhaul. And I still agree with that. But let me tell you, for you folks that work in that jail, I know darn well that not every one of you are complacent. I know there's a lot of you that work in there that are hardworking, honest officers that do your job the way you're supposed to do. And had you been on duty that day, things may have been different. So for those of you that are doing your job at that jail the way you're supposed to do it, thank you very much for your service. And please don't let this knock you down. Please continue to do your job and drive on. Things will get better. Don't let it knock you down. But let's fix the problems in your jail and get that morale built up. Don't let this knock you down. And it's going to take all of you officers that I just mentioned that are honest, hardworking officers that deserve a shout out, because what happens when this gets to be nationwide news is everybody thinks, oh, every single officer, male and female in there must be bad. No, we know there's a bunch of good officers in there, men and women in there, heroes, protecting the citizens. So please, for those of you that do your job there, don't let this knock you down. Stay strong and keep going forward.
I love that, because our greatest concern is always generalizing that out. You know, the negative actions of one become the definition of us all. And the sad thing is, guys, here's another thing before we get to Steve to answer that question, is that sometimes when you have that failure and the public gets wind of it, the public may make an obvious solution that we already know about. But the problem is they generalize it out as if we're all failing at that level. And they wind up making things more complex. And now the problem is the people that were doing their job wind up feeling that they're being punished, because now we're being micromanaged and we're the ones doing our job. So even when you have a failure, even at a facility, you really want to try to hold the people accountable so you don't mistakenly punish the people that were doing their job, because if anything, those are the people that we have to keep their morale up. And the problem is when you go to generally sweep a whole facility, the people that were doing the job, the ones that you need, become disenfranchised, and they're the first ones to go. Hey, Steve, what's your thoughts on what we were discussing?
Yeah, I was actually thinking back to the escape that was at my facility. Two guys were able to get through their window. We think it was assisted from the outside with a construction crew actually was working on the building. They were frosting all the windows. And these two individuals were able to literally cut their way out and escape off the 4th floor of a high-rise facility, and they were gone the entire shift. And the officers working this unit, they would walk by, and they had their servers with their inmates, and the inmates said, nah, they don't want to eat. Okay, go to the next cell. So, number one, they failed to do their duties. But what happened after they finally found out, these inmates were long gone. But it changed the morale of the entire facility was low, because there was several officers that encountered that worked that unit that day, along with the supervisors. You know, the supervisors are ultimately responsible for these officers who are working these units, and then the commanders are responsible for them. And everybody was getting the wrath from up top, including the news now getting a hold of it, and all your local agencies trying to track these two individuals down. So now you're on the news saying, yeah, I was working that unit that day or today, and this happened on my floor. But, you know, morale was low for a while. But what it did do, they actually caught these two guys about a month later each. One was a domestic, one got caught at Home Depot. but they caught these guys. But what it did for the agency, it changed the whole outlook and how the policy on certain things, such as head counts. Now officers have to go inside the cells every shift, check the windows, you know, just little things that now they're doing, which is helping their operations to make it safer. So unfortunately, that took an escape for this to happen. Nothing happened. Nobody was injured or assaulted or killed during this, but it changed policies to make the facility safer. Like I always say, officers hate two things: change and the way things are. So this changed up policies, right? This changed the way things were being done, but now they're acclimated to it. The inmates are acclimated to it, and it's an everyday thing now. So it changed. It turned out to be for the good for the agency.
You know, you said something so powerful, man. Failure is feedback, but if you close your eyes to it and you deny it, then you don't learn. And the problem is the facility goes back to where it was. You know, so if you're sitting there denying the mistakes and denying the failures, then there's no growth. And now the fail, yeah, it's just, hey, Russ, what's your thoughts on that? And then I want to go to duty run as well.
Yeah, you know, it's just that old thing of, you know, are we gonna close our eyes and you know, cover our ears and close our mouths and just pretend that everything is hunky dory, or are we gonna see this as a catalyst for change in order to make things better? You know, you can't make a knife sharper unless you push it against that whetstone and peel some of that layer off in order to, you know, get it sharp again. And so this is a chance for them to rehabilitate themselves and their image. And it's just going to be a matter of whether they're going to avail themselves of that opportunity or if they're going to look at it as an inconvenience and that life is unfair.
Wow, you said rehabilitate the workers. You know, that was it, guys. If you work in corrections, obviously we rehabilitate inmates, but the inmates. But I like the way you just did that twist. That was well played. Hey, what's your thoughts on that, Duty Ron?
Well, you know, Anthony, I mean, I mirror most of the thoughts of your panel here, your esteemed panel, because I did spend quite a bit of my time in and out of different correctional facilities from state, local, and federal level when I worked in the TRIP team on the New York City Police Department. So I did go around to a lot of facilities and saw how they operated, and it was always professional. It was always a kind of a team effort. And I think that, you know, when you let something like this get to your entire staff, then now you're going to be completely defeated. So you have to kind of, you know, learn by the mistakes. Upper management has to change things. Things always, listen, any department, any big department is a reactionary department, right? So I think the correctional facilities, the correctional, you know, field is probably the same way. Something happens, you know, somebody f***ed up, and they kind of have to change what they're doing, right? So I think there has to be change. We have to admit that there's a mistake. That's part of that's the first line of actually changing things, is when people from the upper management now say, hey, we screwed up. You know, I don't want to use my bleep again and get everybody's ears messed up, but hey, we effed up. And we need to try to change that to kind of make this thing better and never happen again. Again, it's a difficult word to say, never again, but that's part of the process, and I feel that it's important, and everybody has to be on board with it, from the chiefs all the way down to the grunts that are on the front lines and working behind the walls in corrections. I have a tremendous respect for you guys, because unlike other police officers and detectives, I was in and out of the facility. Sometimes I sat for counts for 5, 6, 7 hours when the counts were all up. And I sat there and I waited inside the facility. So I knew what was going on. I saw what was going on. I saw some of the struggles. And that's what made me gain great respect for the job that you guys do, the men and women in the corrections field.
You know, and by the way, thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. Obviously, the love is in return. I want to mention something, guys, real quick. So we did get some bad news earlier today. We had a officer from Rikers Island, one of our brothers, take his own life. He jumped from the Verrazano Bridge. We don't know what the concerns were, but I just want to our hearts go out to his family. He's a city correctional officer, died early Friday after jumping from the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Edward Roman, 38, parked his car near the Staten Island side of the bridge and jumped just after 6:30 a.m. Witnesses called 911. NYPD divers removed him from the water. The shout out goes to our people in Rikers Island, his family. We're so sorry for your loss. Again, just it's tragic, and you know, it's just sad. Just if you guys are out there, know that you're never alone. There's always somebody that's willing to listen. You know, suicides are tough because there's so many people that don't get the closure that they need. They feel they could have done more. But again, another hero gone. So just again, our tribute to him. I want to talk now. This is going to be the interesting part before kind of like what everybody's been asking. We had 2 escapes happen in corrections. I'm going to read the first one real quick. Actually, let me read the lesser one. Let me read the lesser one because one actually involved a stabbing. Let me read the other one first. Inmate escapes transport van, gets in. Well, actually, they're both bad, actually, when you think about it. Inmate escapes transport van, gets in shootout with Indiana police. And the other one is Texas authorities. Inmate stabs CO, escapes from prison bus. So the first one, real quick, I'm going to read just a quick little blurb. An inmate who was being extradited from an Illinois county to an Indiana county escaped officers acquired a firearm and got into a shootout with police Wednesday morning. Fox News reported that Jamie Lopez, 36, escaped from the transport vehicle upon arrival at the Newton County Jail. Officers and state troopers searched for Lopez, who had forced entry into a nearby apartment. Police told Fox 59 that Lopez had acquired a gun during his escape. So it doesn't say. I want to mention it doesn't say he got the gun from the officer, and we'll discuss something about that just in case. But it doesn't say that. It says somehow he acquired a gun. Maybe the escape was planned. We don't know, but it doesn't necessarily say he took the gun from the officer in charge of the escort. After several attempts at negotiation, Lopez fired multiple shots toward responding officers at Jasper County. And then eventually they returned fire, striking Lopez, according to the report. Lopez surrendered. So I want to go with Steve first. Steve, just again, we're very limited here in what this says. Again, we don't know if he took the gun from the transport officer or if he acquired the gun. But what would be the standard for transporting any inmate, any person in custody?
Our policy was anyone outside of that facility being escorted or transported, whether it's to court, to medical appointments, whatever, they're in full restraints. I don't care if you're the most minimum custody individual or you're the most maximum custody individual, you're being restrained because you're still in our custody out in the public's eyes. So everybody's going to see you in handcuffs, a waist chain, and leg restraints, double locked. And they're not going to be we're going to check, make sure they're not tight enough or loose enough where you can pop them off. If they're going outside the facility, I'm not a big fan of a one officer escort. I never have been, and I hardly ever see it. 2 officers minimum. I was reading the same thing you were reading just now, and it just blows my mind when someone's able to escape and run, and then, like they said, acquire a handgun. So I know there's still a lot that's unsaid and unknown right now where he got this handgun, but they got to revisit policy there. What happened?
Well, the good thing is Ron actually has a clip he wants to play for us. So if you guys don't mind, I'll give it to Ron real quick.
All right. So the clip that I'm going to play is not about the escape that you're talking about in Indiana, but it is the one in Texas. So if you want to wait till we get to that, we'll play that one because that's what I said.
Oh, that's the one with the stabbing of the CO, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so let's just see. So Russ, I mean, they're both escapes, so they're going to have the same. They should have the same procedure. So if you want to cross into the one from Texas, we could do that, Ron.
Okay. All right. I'm going to just share my screen. This is going to be the first time I'm doing this, and I think it will work out well. There you go. All right.
Some breaking news out of Texas. Another fugitive is on the run. A murderer so dangerous that just within the last few hours, authorities have added him to the state's top 10 most wanted fugitives list. His name is Gonzalo Lopez. He is serving a life sentence for capital murder and attempted capital murder. Authorities say he assaulted a corrections officer on a bus that was transporting prisoners yesterday, crashed that bus, and then he got away. Authorities are warning people in that area tonight, lock your doors, lock your cars, and stay inside. Some schools even went on lockdown within the last few hours. Senior national correspondent Brian Enton joining us live in Centerville, Texas tonight with the latest on this.
By the way, I will have Brian Enton on Sunday night on my show. He's going to be joining me Sunday afternoon, actually. So he is this reporter right here is going to actually be joining me on Sunday in the afternoon.
Manhunt, Brian.
Marnie, this is especially disturbing because this man is so dangerous and because there have been no sightings of him up until now. So many questions about how this could have happened. We are told that he was shackled at his feet and he also had handcuffs on. He somehow managed to get out of both of those. He used some kind of tool to break into the cage where the driver was and managed to take over the bus.
Search for Gonzalo Lopez continues.
In Centerville, Texas, all eyes are on the woods just west of Interstate 75.
12, 13 cars, helicopters, horses, dogs. Sometimes there's been 200-300 people right here.
Seamus Kavanaugh has been watching since this all began Thursday afternoon. He says he figures with this many law enforcement out, Centerville is the safest place in Texas right now. In all, more than 300 law enforcement officers have swarmed this area, and there is now a $15,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Gonzalo Lopez.
This man is a very dangerous person. If you see him, do not attempt to take him into custody by yourself. Contact 911. Have local law enforcement deal with him. He is someone not to be reckoned with by yourself.
So why are they so concerned about Lopez? Well, not only did he overpower 2 guards in yesterday's escape, his rap sheet includes several extremely violent attacks.
He has a capital murder conviction out of Hidalgo County. He also has an attempted capital murder conviction out of Webb County. He killed a man in 2005 with a pickaxe after kidnapping the man and asking for a ransom for his return.
Of course, the biggest question now is where is the fugitive? But as the investigation into what happened continues, there are other tough questions the Department of Criminal Justice must answer. Can you describe the restraints that he had on in the bus? Was he shackled? And how is it possible that he was able to get out of those?
He was wearing handcuffs. He had handcuffs, leg restraints also. How he got out of them, we do not know.
So he got out of the handcuffs and the leg restraints?
Yeah, he got up into the driver's compartment. Are you aware of what happened?
Yes.
He got up into the driver's compartment. He had nothing on his legs or in his head when he took out across the cow pasture.
And so right now there is a $15,000 reward for any information that could lead to this inmate. They're using horses and they've got dogs out in the woods behind me, and they expect to search all night long. Marnie?
Wow. Brian, do they think that he's still in that area?
So there you have it. Let me just take that off. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Just when you hear things like this, Anthony, it's heart-wrenching for the men and women in the corrections field, because this is a black eye again on our great men and women who do a fantastic job of this. But when you're handling prisoners and millions of transportations and interactions and movements, unfortunately, you're going to have this happen. And we got to do better. And that's all I'm going to say about it right now, because we don't know exactly what happened and how he got out of the leg shackles, how he got out of the restraints, and how the F did he get underneath. He used a tool to cut underneath and shimmy up into the cockpit of the bus. And now a fight for the life of that corrections officer began, and it went outside, and he fought outside. And then the guy in the back, the security guy, shot out the back tires. That was an unbelievable thing that he did, because that made that bus incapacitated for the most part. He was only able to drive it a mile before he crashed into a grassy knoll. And what those 2 officers did, they ran a whole mile after that bus, and none of the 15 other inmates got out. So there was a lot of good that happened here, but again, a lot of bad too.
And the scary thing about this all too is we also had another one that came out of Oregon. Armed and dangerous Oregon fugitive wanted for rape, assault after prison escape. Somebody very scary. The U.S. Marshal Service is searching for a fugitive, Andrew Kristovich, who escaped from an Oregon prison, is wanted on new charges of rape, assault, and strangulation. Kristovich, 38, was initially arrested to connections to a 2018 cartel-linked gun and drug charge, along with 30 other defendants. Last year, he was sentenced to 60 months or 5 years in prison with credit for time served, as well as 4 years of supervised release. Oregon authorities say the fugitive escaped a correction facility in Yamhill County on April 25th before traveling to an apparent ex-girlfriend's residence in Clark County, where she says he assaulted and raped her before fleeing with her debit card, cell phone, and car.
Yeah, he walked off of that location. He walked out of that minimum security facility. He called his girlfriend. He told her he was getting out early release. She didn't believe him, and then he threatened her, and she finally came. And then he proceeded to rape and beat her. And this guy's a real scumbag. You know.
Well, the scary thing about this. So, hey, Mackenzie, Greg knows her. I mean, Steve knows her. Greg Piper too. Hey, you want to know what's scary about this, guys? Too, is that once you have an escape and they know it's successful, other inmates will start picking up on the trend, which means that we also have to step up our game because, believe it or not, guys, when you have inmates that are with limited resources, they become more innovative, which means staff has to become more resourceful. So when the public sees, well, how could this guy escape, and you have all these measures in play, of course, most of us are going to think complacency. I mean, I remember an issue back in Georgia where we lost 2 officers, and when they looked at the situation, there was a lot of complacency involved, gates that weren't properly locked, and people just weren't paying attention. But sometimes, even if you have all the measures in place, sometimes inmates can be very innovative. I mean, they're in survival mode, guys. You have no idea what people are willing to do when they're in survival mode. I mean, it's amazing what they could think of that we would never think of, and now we have to step up. So I always tell people that the tighter the environment gets, the more innovative the inmate will become, and the more resourceful you have to be. Russ, when you see something like this and you see what looks like to be impossible measures, I think in your experience, you know that impossible is not impossible, but it does start first with complacent staff first, correct?
Yeah, when I see the way that the one went down with this, where he broke into the crew compartment and touched off the fight from there. The first thing that comes to my mind are 2 things. Possibly an inefficient search where somebody missed something, or the second thing that comes to my mind is too many of these jails are doing things like letting inmates work on these buses and clean them out and clean them up. And so possibly this tool that he had could have been something that was stashed there by an outside help, whether it was an inmate or somebody else that managed to get access to that bus, and an employee or something. That's going to obviously be part of this investigation. The other thing that I say is staff that are on a bus like that, regardless of whether they have a shotgun or not, they're put in that position that can often be, mitigated by, if you just go back to that good old standard, right? Okay, 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is key. I realize people don't want to, have to take extra staff along. They don't want to have that emergency chase vehicle following things. But all these redundant measures stop things like this from happening. So when I say that, it's not just about the manpower. It's not just about the number of shackles that you have. I always like to have 3. If I was taking 1 inmate out, I'd have 3 sets of shackles just in case 2 of them broke. But then going on from there, the amount of staff that you have, 1 is never going to be enough, because your backup only lasts as long as that person is up and running. And if the inmate doesn't even ever do anything to that individual, if that officer just collapses from a heart attack or whatever, now, there's no telling where that inmate is going to end up. You might think he's a good guy. He may be, he may not be, but that's why we have to have redundancy and contingency planning built into our policies and our procedures. So once again, all right, 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is key.
Yeah, guys, I want to get to a question from 616, but first, Ron actually has the video from the Oregon escape, so we would like to see that if you don't mind, Ron. I appreciate that.
You got it. No problem.
I'm getting a computer. I want you guys to know something. Because I love, this is on me. I'm stepping up tomorrow. I'm going to wear the pants, tell my wife I need to buy a computer. I'm sure she'll allow that. And we'll go from there.
She will allow it, because it'll help to further enhance your, okay. I don't know why it's, okay, there you go. Yeah, you had to do that part. I couldn't do that.
Yes, sir.
All right.
For another dangerous fugitive who escaped prison. This time it happened in Oregon, just days before the highly publicized prison escape in Alabama. that, as you know, captured the nation's attention. Here is what we know at this hour. U.S. Marshals are looking for this man. His name is Andrew Kristovich. He walked away from a corrections facility in late April, and since his escape, he is already accused of committing even more crimes. In just a moment, I'm going to be speaking with a member of the U.S. Marshal's Office who is on this case as we speak. But first, correspondent Tom Negavan joining us live tonight with what we know about this fugitive. Tom.
Yeah, Marnie, it was just 5 days before Casey and Vicky White got away that Kristovich escaped from that prison, a federal prison in Oregon. Now, nothing brazen about the way he did it, but it's what happened after that that has police agencies on edge, on alert across the country, and eager to recapture a felon who, quite literally, just walked away.
18 days on the run. 38-year-old Andrew Kane Kristovich left the Sheridan, Oregon federal minimum security camp more than 2 weeks ago. According to his ex-girlfriend, he messaged her using a smuggled cell phone, saying he was being released early and wanted to be picked up. When she refused, Kristovich threatened her and her children. That's when she says she agreed to come get him near the prison and bring him back to her apartment 2 hours away in Clark County, Washington. Once there, she says, he terrorized her for hours, raping and choking her. He stole her debit card, cell phone, and car, and left, ditching the car along the way. The ex-girlfriend and her children are now in hiding because of what she's told police if captured. Kristovich now faces a long list of new charges likely to be tacked on to his original 2018 sentence of 5 years. Residents near the prison say they weren't told anyone broke out. This man not showing his face because he's scared.
If you hold prison or people there, you're supposed to make sure they're secure. They're not getting out. And we should have known what happened, though. If somebody broke out of prison and did all this stuff, raped somebody.
If authorities are right, that man is safe, and Kristovich is far away in Snohomish County, Washington, more than an hour northwest of Seattle, where he has ties. Authorities think someone there is helping him hotel surf, change locations often. He's considered armed and dangerous, believed to have new weapons, and has made statements he will not be returning to custody. That's why the U.S. Marshals Service has released these photos, hoping someone tips them off before he can hurt anyone else. Aside from his description seen on the screen, his former girlfriend says he's heavier than these pictures. She says he looked puffy, his face very red.
That was back in 2018, Marty, that Kristovich was arrested and charged with drug manufacturing and manufacturing ghost AK-47s. Now, most people know what those are. That's a Kalashnikov, a Russian-made.
Christopher Tomeo with the Pacific Northwest Violent Offender Task Force. So you guys have your work cut out for you, Deputy. This guy is armed and dangerous. Where's your focus right now?
Our focus is honestly just trying to find him as soon as possible. We're working pretty hard right now. We have plenty of people dedicating some resources and time for this, just to keep the public safe.
What type of weapons do you think he might have at this point?
We don't know for sure, but based on his history, as you said, it is likely that he armed himself and may have handgun or rifle.
You guys do this all the time, so it's something you're accustomed to. But when you've got a guy who says publicly, "I'm not going to be returning to custody," how do you approach it differently?
Yeah, unfortunately, we deal with this a lot. Most people say that. Sometimes they mean it, sometimes they don't. In this case, and most of them, we treat them the same. If that's what they want to say, we have to take it seriously and treat as if they're going to go out fighting and not want to go back to prison. So we take it pretty serious.
It's troubling that he was able to walk away from this minimal.
I think that was enough. It gives a good, gives you a good overview of what's going on with this case. But the U.S. Marshals, as we know, they're the premier arm of the federal law enforcement, and they go out and bring these guys back to justice. They know how to hunt people down. I've worked with them myself. U.S. Marshals in the Eastern District here in New York are second to none, and I know across the United States they do a hell of a job. So kudos to those men and women in the U.S. Marshals.
You know, someone asked a great question. And by the way, thanks, Ryan. You're actually adding a lot to the show. So I really appreciate you coming on doing this, because this actually gives us more information and gives us a chance to add more. Because obviously the first thing I picked up on was the guy quickly attacked the system. You know, how do we trust the system now when they're supposed to be holding people, you know, holding them? And the funny thing is, guys, if you notice, when an escape occurs, the reason why it's a big embarrassment is we can't hide an escape. We have to let everybody know because we're accountable for that. So we're one of the agencies that have to step up immediately and tell people we fucked up. I mean, there is no ifs and buts about it. So, you know, I mean, think about it. We have to call, oh, sorry, we have to call the schools. I mean, there's a lot of escape plans. Each facility is going to have their own escape plan, but a lot of them are going to have, you got to call the nearest schools, the local agencies. You got to put your people out. So there's no hiding when escape occurs. But one of the questions that was asked that I thought was unique, and I want to, I just got to find it real quick. Someone basically mentioned, I'll go with Gary first and we'll go up. Do you think that there are more people escaping custody, or do you think the media is just covering it more? What do you think, Gary?
Well, that's a tough question. I will say that what we've seen in the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks is way too much, and we need to do something about it.
Security prison, but now he's.
Sorry.
That's right. I will say that
shut it off.
when I was touring a German prison, I'm standing in the middle of a German prison, and the officers asked me, this is Germany now, folks. The German officer said, why do you folks in America have so many escapes? Because Germany is one of those countries that's known to have very, very, very few escapes. That's kind of embarrassing for me. I'm looking at these German officers saying, you guys are funded with a lot of money for high-tech equipment, the best vehicles, your prison walls are just unbelievable, and your transport vehicles are out of this world. And that's the best answer I could give them, is we're not being funded enough in our prison system to have a lot of high-tech equipment. Now, the second thing is, are we being trained enough? And I've always preached we must train on prisoner transport more. You know, how many agencies out there, if you're listening, have annual training on prison transport, and you actually do a mock transport and go through the whole works from A through Z? I don't think that's being done enough. I just had to get that out there because it was on my mind. And, you know, Anthony, like you said, prison protocol makes us have to go out there and tell everybody, boom, this guy just escaped from us. And we have to get his photo out immediately per prison protocol to every agency. And we have to start the manhunt immediately. And I think that the media today is on everything we do. They're on us on every little thing we do. And especially escapes, they're on it, and they won't let up until we catch the escapee. So I don't know if we're having more. I honestly can't answer. I don't know if we're having more escapes because I don't have access to the numbers. What I would like to see is someone come up with the chart, and I'll even search for it tomorrow. How many escapes have we had in the United States so far from prisons? How many escapes have we had from jails? And then let's compare it to 5 years ago. That's the only way you can answer that question, is actually get the data in front of you.
Right. And I also want to add something too, because I want to address Cupcake's question. We're also doing tons of transports all across the country. I don't know how many are going out daily. And, you know, you assume by number. So, I mean, I think it'd be better if you did a percentage, which may be hard to get because, you know, we may have had 3 in the last couple of days, but I'm sure there have been hundreds that go out daily, court trips, you know, medical, work details, whatnot. Cupcake says, Tear Talk with Anthony Gangi. Do you think escapes should be broadcasted more due to public safety? Unfortunately, I didn't want to say unfortunately, but yes, there's a liability when it comes to that. When there's so let me just do this. An escape from custody or a vehicle or escape from a facility, there is a time frame. Let me tell you something. I mean, I could start from a facility perspective. Maybe Steve and Russ could talk about something on the road. But when an escape happens, so there are measures in place. because the last thing you want to do is call a potential escape and then the inmate never left. That's an embarrassment because of all the procedures that are going to happen. So there is usually going to be an immediate check and balance. So basically, let's say an officer. So I'm going to do the facility side, and then maybe Russ and them could touch on the vehicle side. So
Do you
I'm
want
an
the
officer.
stats? Do you want the stats for a second? I mean,
Oh, yeah. Do you have it? Yeah, I'll take it. Do you have it?
So in 2019, I'm not going to put them up because it might come up like, it might not come up clear. I can try sharing the screen, but in 2019, 2,231 inmates escaped from state and federal prisons combined. It was a decrease from the previous year, which was 2,351. So 2018, 2351, 2019, 2231.
So let me ask the question though. So this is what we were discussing before. Do those escapes actually are physical escapes, or do they count walk-offs?
I mean, I could probably look for the breakdown. Let me see if I could share the screen, because this is given some statistical data from actually going back to the year 2000, when there was 5,168 prison escapees. So Anthony, you have to allow that to share onto the screen. All right, there you go. So if you look at this chart up here, this goes from 2000, and then in 2001 it goes down to 4,511, and it decreases over the
Does
years.
it have a breakdown per capita though? Because the prison system, has been steadily decreasing over the past many years. So knowing just raw
It could
numbers,
be an increase. Is that what you're saying, Russ?
yeah, I'm looking. I mean, I obviously I can't see it on there, but I'm just wondering if there's a per capita. And you start talking about statistics and what does somebody include, what does somebody not include? It's tough to know.
Yeah, it says supplementary notes generated using the Correctional Statistical Analytic Tool.
Wow, that's fancy.
CSAT. Yeah. So this comes from, it looks like the Bureau BJS.gov. So it's coming from reliable sources, I guess, and it just keeps going on and on with different information. But as you could see, I mean, it decreased as the years going forward. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is, Ron, because first off, it's amazing how quick you're able to. I'm just fascinated by how quick you're able to find these things. So I'm definitely getting my thing tomorrow, guys. And if my wife divorces me, Uncle Ron said I can live with them for a little bit. Hey, hey, Russ made a good point. If I could bring that up real quick. So the population of inmates have decreased. So I don't know if that's relative, but that's great to a very good perspective. But also, Russ or Steve, or maybe Russ, can you explain for the audience here the difference between a walk-off and a escape? Because sometimes the media, kind of says that they're the same, and they're not. Do you know?
Okay, so I was going to say, so in California, they're the same. Right. But the difference is in the penal code. The penal code recognizes the difference in the penalty for it between whether or not it was from a secure facility with or without force, and whether it was from a non-secure perimeter with or without force. So those are the differences, and we call them walkaways, but walkaways just jargon. It has no relevance to the penal code whatsoever. At least in California. I don't know if walk-offs in New Jersey is in the penal code or not, but that's the difference. And because here in California, for instance, we have I think we have 20 something now fire camps, non-secure perimeters. So all they really have to do is just head in a direction, and they can be out of there. The other thing that we have some minimum support facilities that are outside the secure perimeter at prisons for minimum inmates, and those guys, they can walk off too. Like even at San Quentin, we had what we called the ranch, and there was no fence around it, so there was nothing to stop guys from just traveling on if they wanted to. And what you tended to see though in this little batch of escapes that we've just been talking about today, though, I think it's less about things happening at the tactical level than the strategic level. Because you look, that one guy, he had a couple of capital cases, but they're moving him in mass on a bus, What's that about? This guy that escaped up there in Oregon, he was in a minimum facility, even though he had a bunch of heinous crimes in his past. So I think that some of this is happening at the classification level, where they're not taking enough measures, as it were, that they're not being proactive in their approach at looking at these people and what the threat assessment should be for that individual.
Yeah, and guys, I think kind of like exactly what Russ said. If there's an obstacle in the way, it's an escape, sort of, to some extent. But if it's like a work release or a full minute, they could just kind of walk off. There's no fence, no nothing. The question before technically was Casey White an escape because he was just escorted out? So I mean, it's unique for us. We look at it as, what were the obstacles? Did the person have to maneuver around obstacles to get out? For a person in a cruiser or a transport vehicle, look at all the obstacles. They're shackled. They're put in different compartments of the vehicle. And hey, I want to mention something too. When we talked about the first incident that happened in Indiana, now I'm not going to say how they acquired the gun because nobody knows. But I want to mention something. This is my correctional people out there. We're not used to carrying weapons. We're not. And this is going back to the Georgia incident. We're not regular street cops. I get it. We don't carry guns all day. I get it. But when we go on a transport, sometimes for us, because we're not used to it, we become very complacent with our weapons. Sometimes we take off our belt and just put it on the vehicle, or put it on the next seat or whatever it is. Or sometimes we're just not conscious of where that gun is. I have seen correctional officers walking an inmate or placing an inmate in a hospital bed and just kind of leaning over them with their gun directly over the bed, again, because we're not constantly wearing that weapon. Do you believe, and again, not in this case, but I'll go with Steve first and then Russ and then maybe Ron, because Ron would definitely, and Gary, we must go through everybody in this, but do you think in corrections we may not be as as conscious aware about that gun sometimes? We'll go with Steve first.
Yeah, I can speak on behalf of North Carolina Department of Corrections. I mean, a lot of agencies like the Department of Corrections, they have to check out a weapon and then they put it in their holster they're issued, and then they go do their things. So it's not even their weapon. They don't carry it all the time. They just go check it out. My former agency, the armed detention, they call them ADOs, armed detention officers. They actually went through a month-long school. They had to qualify every year. So they were very familiar with their weapon. They carried it to and from work. I mean, they were everything but a sworn officer, pretty much. They did they got to do off-duty gigs with sworn staff. So they were pretty familiar with their weapon and retention and going through all the fun stuff that patrol or sheriff deputies and patrol officers do. So kudos to my former agency for doing all of that and implementing the armed detention officer school. But a lot of agencies like DOCs and stuff, they say, hey, you're going to guard him or you're going to escort him, go check out that 12 gauge or that that pistol and put it in your holster and go ahead and escort. So yeah, it's bad when it comes to that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Are you in agreement or?
Yeah, I think that I don't know if it creates complacency, because I think sometimes when you're not used to it, that you would be more conscious of it being there, because it would feel different, and you're outside the perimeter. You're doing something that's hundreds of times more dangerous, perhaps, than what's inside. So I don't know. Maybe that could be the case. We've all seen instances recently where correctional officers, but even police officers, not being mindful of their gun, not practicing good retention stances, not good retention techniques. So I'm kind of torn about that. The thing that I really generally don't like, though, is, a lot of these departments, they have the 2-officer, 1-gun policy. So you're stuck out there and you've got, one officer with a gun, and then you've got no other gun to cross cover that one. And I think that lacks a lot of desirability. If you have to handle the inmate, you know what? Spend some money on a lock case, so you can, have that officer divest his weapon and go handle the inmate and then come back and get it again, because otherwise it's only the officer with the gun that has to be targeted. Too many departments, they look only at the internal threat of the inmate as being a problem, and they don't look at the external threats at all. It doesn't even cross their mind. 2 guys on one two guys on one inmate is enough. Well, what is that inmate? Is he a high-ranking Crip, Blood, Aryan Brotherhood? And they don't think about that external threat, or just the fact that officers are targeted, assaulted, and basically attacked for no reason, across the country. So there is that. So I wish that some people would get their heads together and try and solve that problem.
Yeah, and guys, you want to know something? So obviously on a trip, we're going to have a weapon. We're taking the inmate outside. And the funny thing is the weapon serves two functions. Well, three. One, to protect us in case we're a target, we could be. One, to protect the inmate, because guess what? Some inmates, like Russ said, you can have people that have hits on their lives, and our job is to protect the inmate. Sometimes the inmate isn't the threat. Sometimes the threat could come from, I remember dealing with hospital trips where they thought, hey, you take this inmate to the hospital, be wary, he's a high-ranking gang member, and he's a target. So now here we are, and our job right now is really protecting this inmate so we can get them to the hospital and get them back. And then obviously if the inmate becomes a threat. But here's the funny thing, guys. All because an inmate escapes from custody doesn't mean we can shoot them right away. I mean, there's a lot of things in play before that can even occur, which includes the risk that they present to the public. Like the one guy from Oregon, maybe, but you're also shooting a gun. You're accountable for every bullet. You shoot that gun in an open area, or you use OC in a hospital. You can't. Some of the tools that we have cannot apply in the settings that we're in. It's not like you're given something and you have carte blanche. I mean, you're trusted to know when and when not to use it. I mean, there have been times when there's such a consequence that maybe, I know this may sound crazy, but hear me out. It may be best just let that inmate go. I can't shoot at the person right now. I'll run after him. Don't get me wrong, but what am I running towards? If me and my partner are, let's say, trying to pick up an inmate from a halfway house, and all of a sudden the inmate knows we're coming, or the resident, and they start to take off, I don't know if it's in our best position to chase after them because we don't know that neighborhood. We don't know what we're running into. It's best for us to call the police just like, a normal citizen would say we need help. We went to a halfway house to pick up an inmate. They took off. We gave some chase, but, you could be running right into a trap because they have access to the outside world. So you got to be very, very strategic in your response. And I think the first thing you want to look at is, yes, you have the safety of the public, 100%. But am I safe in doing that, or do I pose a greater risk to myself and the public? Gary, what's your thoughts on that? And then I want to go to Ron because I think Ron has thoughts on that as well.
Well, I want to tell you, my sheriff here in Polk County, Grady Judd, for detention, okay, we're not talking about his road deputies. We're talking about his detention deputies. Sheriff Judd makes us qualify 4 times a year, twice a year with what the state mandates that we qualify with a 40 Glock or Glock 40. And then he has what he calls his sheriff's qualification course, which is much more complicated. And Sheriff Judd also makes us take weapon retention training twice a year. Now, see, I think it all depends on your agency again. If you have a sheriff or a warden that wants you to train more in these areas, and I highly recommend that all departments start training more in weapons retention. I want to give kudos to the officer from the video Duty Ron showed us. He had enough foresight. He knew the inmate was trying to get his weapon, and he fought him off, and he had weapons retention. I don't know if they've been trained in that or if that was just instinct on that officer to keep him from getting that weapon. So he did a great job keeping that inmate from that weapon. But I think detention deputies, correctional officers in a prison, we must have more training in weapons, and we must have more training in weapons retention and qualification and how to handle that weapon. I think it will help us immensely on these inmate transports.
Yeah, and guys, by the way, we Unsolved Crime says, out of curiosity, do you guys shoot to kill? We shoot to stop. Unfortunately, the biggest area of a person's body is going to be their torso. So we don't want to kill the person. It's just that if we're going to be most effective, we can't shoot at a smaller target. We have to shoot at the bigger target because, again, we're accountable for that bullet. So we don't shoot to kill. We shoot to stop the threat. Unfortunately, again, the biggest part of the body. What's your thoughts on that, Ron, out of curiosity?
Well, again, weapons proficiency is important. You got to be able to know how to use it. You need to know how to retain it. And as a patrol officer in the New York City Police Department, that was one of the major sticking points while we were being trained in the police academy, and when we would go for our qualifications. We would do combat shooting. We would do, weak hand supported and tactical shooting, things of that nature. But you need to be proficient with your weapon, and you need to know how to use it, retain it, and so on and so forth. And that only comes from training and repetition. I used to go to on my own. I used to go to the range when I was on patrol and while I was a cop for 20 years. Most of the guys would be like, why are you going shooting? It's a waste of time. I want to be able to hit the fucking target if I got to hit the target. I don't want to be throwing 15 rounds out there and maybe one of them grazes somebody. So the bottom line is if you're a corrections officer and you are getting plucked every once in a while to go and guard somebody and strap on a weapon, you should be going for your own training if your department is not giving it to you. And I can't overemphasize that enough, because you know how many scenes of police-involved shootings I've been at, and a volley of rounds fired by multiple officers and none hit the target. It's just cringeworthy when I would look at the reports, the annual reports for New York City Police. And it's probably like that, in many other departments. But that being said, the transport teams that I've witnessed and that I've come into contact with, that's the men and women in New York City corrections who that's their everyday post. They're transporting prisoners. Those guys and girls knew how to shoot, and they knew how to retain their weapon. And everything was tight for the most part. I never saw any kind of laid back, lax, kind of scary behavior. I mean, coming in and out of facilities and transporting prisoners. And these guys, I would go upstate. I would go to Fishkill. I'd go to, Clinton. I was all over upstate New York at all the state prisons. And at those prisons, I'd be like, oh shit, there's a New York City Department of Corrections van or bus. And you would see them picking up, bringing guys and girls from up there who did their state time and then had city warrants, and they'd take them down to do their part, to do the rest of their bids that they have locally. So training comes. It's like that with anything. You go to a mechanic that doesn't know how to do your brakes and he's just winging it. He's not going to do a good job. So us as law enforcement professionals, I don't care if you're working behind the wall or working out in the street. You got to know how to use the weapons and the things that are in your tool belt. You got to be able to know how to use them.
Yeah, and I love that, because it's. I agree. Obviously, knowing how to use them and when to use them. Hey, Russ, out of curiosity, I think Steve also, can you shoot any inmate that escapes, or can you spray OC in a hospital when you have a combative inmate, Russ?
Okay, so what they've done here in California is they've really struggled to do their best to confuse the issue for officers. I think in some kind of vain hope that you won't shoot someone that's escaping. The time that we do feel pretty clear to shoot an inmate that's escaping is, when he's over that wall. They started coming in with a bunch of stuff as to whether or not that individual presents clear and present danger to the public, and whether he's been sentenced, and all kinds of other stuff. And as a matter of fact, I'll just come right out and say that the last few use of force classes I attended, they were very obviously not trying to provide anybody with a clear answer. I will tell you that there is case law in the SCOTUS called Graham. No, it's not Graham versus Connor. One of them is Graham versus Connor, and the other one is Tennessee versus Garner. And it's all about using force when it's reasonable. In Graham versus Connor, it was about physical force. And then in Tennessee versus Garner, it was about shooting a fleeing felon, which they said, you can't do that unless he presents a clear and present danger, a clear threat, immediate threat to the public. So what that exactly means is still kind of a little bit subjective, but I would think that they would have to be armed. I would think that they would, have to have already been throwing shots, that they would already have to have shown a wanton disregard for life, and that by not taking them into immediate custody by using deadly force, that would be the only time you could do it. So I've been out of the game for a little bit now. But I will tell you that was the last thing that was going on, is they were really trying to muddy the waters because they really didn't want us to shoot fleeing felons.
I'm just going to block somebody real quick. Okay. Thanks, guys. Hey, I want to also touch on, for Steve gets in. Do you guys know that, so in some facilities, so let's say I'm working in a prison right now. I'm the officer. I'm on the tower. I see an inmate escaping. Now, I have the weapons and stuff to, give the orders to tell the inmate to stop. But I may not have the authority to shoot that inmate until I have to call it in and wait for whoever at that highest level to authorize that, which is very unique. But for some facilities, I don't know how it is in every facilities, but for some states, that's going to be the case. I got an inmate that's getting ready to climb a fence. So I'm in the tower and I'm just waiting for the authority to go ahead and shoot the inmate if need be. But with that said, in some states, you can't shoot them when they're kind of climbing up. You literally have to, if you're going to do something, it has to be when they're already on the other side. It's so unique and just so, it's very challenging because the people on the front line that are in the best position to make that decision, because here I am, I'm the front line, I see it, but now I have to call 10 people who are so far away who don't know what it is, who probably doesn't want to be in the position to make that decision anyway. They want to empower that out. Trust me. I know. You want to empower that out. But having said that, the authority is given to you, and that the person in the best position is, waiting, wanting to do something, but waiting for that authority. Steve, what's your thoughts on that? Do you agree that, it's not an easy thing because obviously there's so many obstacles?
Yeah, justifying that one, that would be a tough one. I can't speak on the prison aspect of, someone escaping when you can and cannot shoot. But I know, our guys, if we were guarding in the hospital or going to the funeral home to visit a loved one who passed or something, we always would send a taser. So everyone was armed with a taser. That would be your first go-to inside the hospital because OC, of course, would contaminate the other patients and the nurses and everyone else. Lethal option that may miss, ricochet, hit someone else or whatever. So we would always go for taser first inside of hospitals or in the public. I really can't think of any time that we would use lethal force on an inmate unless they were causing a threat or harming towards someone else. Just by them escaping, I don't think it's justified here in North Carolina, where I'm at, to use lethal force.
Anthony, can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course, Ron.
Great points, because Steve is letting everybody know the rules of engagement vary from state to state, county to county, city to city. So there's different levels of what can be done, and there's different policies within particular agencies. That being said, Gonzalo Lopez, who was the 46-year-old that escaped custody on Thursday in Texas, he was using deadly physical force against a correction officer, the driver. He stabbed him in the left hand while he was retaining his weapon on his right, and he also stabbed him in the chest. Whether he had a shank or whatever he had, that's a deadly, it's deadly physical force. Therefore, that's why they volleyed those rounds at him as he was a fleeing felon. Under Texas rules of engagement, and that would hold true here in New York as well. If somebody is using deadly physical force against a police officer or a corrections officer, you're allowed to use deadly physical force to stop. And if he's running away, you just our rule is that you just can't shoot him in the back. So, but under New York state law, you can. shoot a fleeing felon in the back. Under New York City guidelines with state corrections and police, you can't.
Yeah, guys, believe it or not, I like what everybody's saying here, because as you could tell, just as we're discussing it right now, imagine having to make that decision within a split second. Because I mean, we're discussing it right now, but that decision has to be made in a split second. And the scary thing is, guys, is when you have outsiders making the rules more complex, we become more confused, because we're not so much worried about what measure we have to take, because we're willing to step up and do the job. We're just worried about the judgment that comes after that. You know, and basically it's funny how people could talk about, you know, what decision they would have made, an hour, 2 hour discussion, and then the person who only had half a second to figure it out, the person who we should be taking their perspective, doesn't even count. You know, I mean, literally the need to take someone's life is not something that we come to work wanting to do, especially in our profession. Our profession is defined by saving lives, believe it or not. I just told you before, when we take an inmate out on a trip, our job is to protect that inmate just as much as we're supposed to protect ourselves. A lot of people don't realize that, yes, the inmate could be a threat, but sometimes there's a threat on that inmate. And if anybody goes near that inmate, our job is to protect that inmate 100%. And people don't realize that when we have to take a life, believe it or not, taking a life, especially after an escape or, you know, whatever, is usually on the failure of something. And we don't usually adjust to that so well. I know a lot of officers that, you know, have taken a life that still don't adjust, even though the life, you know, they could have been threatened and they still feel a certain way by it. All right, guys. So I figure we could start getting ready to come to a close. I'm getting the texts now. So I was wondering if we could just go around and give our closing thoughts. So I'll start with Ron first. Ron, any closing thoughts? Basically, today we discussed escapes, investigative escapes, you know, just kind of shooting the BS with our people. Any closing thoughts?
Well, first off, I want to just say thank you for allowing me to come up onto your panel. I know, you guys were in the middle of it, but you know, I was out with the missus Friday night's date night, and that's how I stayed married 31 years. I take my better half out on date night Friday night. So that's been something we've been doing since we met 40 years ago. But anyways, I just want to say to the listening audience and to our fellow law enforcement and correctional professionals who watch this replay or watching the live, you know, we always have to, you know, hold ourselves to a higher standard. And at the end of the day, a mistake is a mistake is a mistake. And we always can learn by these instances, and we want to try to minimize them. So training, you know, being able to see clear and concise what happened and what went on, and make it better and do better. And it goes, like I said, from the top down to the grunts who are out there enforcing what needs to be enforced behind the walls and out on the street. So I want to say thank you to the complete audience out here and everybody from Crime Time with Duty Ron and Tier Talk. You guys are a great mix of, you know, like we like to say, cross-pollination. We want to cross-pollinate all of our subscribers. So it's always great to see some of my folks over here and some of your guys and girls coming over to when I go live. So I'll be live again on Sunday afternoon with Brian Enton from News Nation. We saw him here tonight. And thank you, Anthony, Russ, Gary, and Steve. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on with you guys.
Pleasure's ours, Ron. Thanks for helping us out today.
All right,
take care, sir. All right, Steve, you have anything you'd like to say to our audience?
No, I think it was a great topic. Needs to be heard, number one, because you know, a lot of officers forget how good they've got it. Honestly, at some facilities, they don't never have these large issues with officers being manipulated or escapes or improper releases, which could be considered escapes if these individuals don't return to their facilities. There's so many things that I could talk about right now, but honestly, you know, it's an honor to be here with Gary and Russ as always. And you too, Anthony. Sorry. It was actually nice to meet Ron. I haven't met Ron yet. It's kind of nice to be on here with him. But you know, what it all boils down to is, if you notice an officer, or even if you find yourself becoming too familiar with an inmate, stop it. If you notice an officer becoming too familiar, address it. in a professional manner. Sometimes you got to be that dick. Say, hey, man, come here for a second. Don't talk to him like that, or don't, you know what I mean? You got to be stern sometimes in our profession to say, look, that's not right. And if they don't listen, then you go above them. Hey, you're not being a rat. You're looking out for safety and security. That's all it's about. And that's what Guardian RFID does. We care about our corrections officers. Our goal is to protect all 480,000 correction officers in America. Some say that's a big goal, and I think we can do it. I know we can do it with the team that we have, with all former administrators and corrections professionals on our team. By tracking your inmates, knowing where everyone's at all times. And then with the new stuff coming out that we talked about on our last meeting, Anthony and Russ, with the artificial intelligence and facial recognition, all that stuff is going to take our jails and prisons to the next level. Make it safer. That's number one. Giving the officers the tools they need to perform their everyday duties is number two. And again, thank you, and thanks everybody for watching tonight.
Yeah, and guys, if you guys get a chance, Guardian RFID does have a YouTube channel. If you want to be curious to see what type of technology is out there for inmate tracking, definitely check it out. It's pretty interesting. And I think Steve mentioned he's going to talk to Ken and help me get a computer. Guardian RFID is one of my sponsors.
Well,
so,
I'll see what we can do.
Yeah, because I could use a computer with a microphone and all this other stuff. But either way, but obviously very supportive of the profession. All jokes aside, guys, anything I've ever needed from that company. But with that said, guys, if you get a chance, out of curiosity, it's worth checking out, because you could see how far advanced we are, and then you're going to wonder why other facilities don't do it. We're so far advanced that, with this technology, inmate tracking, you literally, inmates have ID cards. You scan them, you know who they are, and it makes the job easier, but also holds people accountable. If they're not doing their job, you can find out easily through the system itself. So again, if you guys get a chance, it's pretty unique. And guys, I'm going to have the last two people say goodbye. Then I want to tell you my show for this Wednesday, which I think you guys are going to find interesting. But Gary, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight, the audience, some real great questions. And you were right, Anthony. This is a very smart group of people. We're all in the same business in one way or another. And for those who aren't even in corrections, I thought they really had their thinking caps on and asked some outstanding questions. Thank you for that. Second, I want to thank all the men and women who work the front line and protect us every night while we sleep. I retired in 2018, so now I'm relying on those folks behind those walls to keep us safe at night. And I want to thank you very much for doing that. And God bless you. And third, I want to thank everyone here on the panel tonight. It was great being with you. And thank you, Anthony, for having me on your panel tonight.
Hey, guys, a little story behind each person. Gary York was one of my original guests when I used to do this stuff for iHeartRadio. And I was so nervous to have him on because he was an internal affairs investigator. So yes, we do that. We do have him in prisons, in jails. We may have some that directly investigate inmate stuff, but then you have the higher level that would investigate staff corruption. So having him on, I was so nervous because I was an officer and my perspective was limited on what they did, because sometimes there's that animosity. Even though we know they're cleaning out the facility, which is not an easy job, by the way, some of us, have a dislike for them, which really doesn't make sense. As I've moved up and I matured in this profession, I know how important it is to have that division, 100%. They're protecting us, they're killing the cancer. But having them on, I was so afraid of how my audience would take them, the officers at that time, and I was wrong. Gary came in and talked about how respectful the profession is. He made sure that he separated the corruption from the good officers, and right off the bat, the audience embraced that. If you guys get a chance, True Prison Stories, a great perspective for anybody looking in, even from the outside, to get an understanding of what this profession is about. If you want to kind of check over that channel, he's got some really good videos, and we'll have him share some true corruption stories as we move forward. And guys, again, still got a surprise for you. I'll tell you when we get done with Russ, I'll tell you what my show is for Wednesday. Okay, Russ, Mr. Chuck Norris, what's up?
No. So anyway, yeah, thanks. This audience has been great. Everyone, watching, whether you're in the profession or not, it's great to, get our side of the story out there. It's great to be able to interface and, fill you in on, what the real deal is with corrections and dismiss some of those myths about us all being, a bunch of knuckle draggers who just do nothing but beat inmates. I've been in some scraps in my career, but I've saved far more inmates than those scraps that I've been in. This is a difficult profession. I hope some of the light that we've helped shed on this tonight with Gary and with Steve and Anthony will just go to show you guys that this is worth getting into if you're thinking about it. This is a place to go, but it is hard. And you will be faced with challenges every day, but being faced with challenges every day just means that you're being given an opportunity to rise to the occasion. And I just love all of you out there and everyone out there. Stay safe, sharpen yourself, make yourself, indispensable to your facility. And let's clean up some of these problems that we have with regards to manipulation and escapes and things like that.
Guys, just wanted to give you, by the way, thanks, guys. I love the audience, obviously. I couldn't have done this without you. I'd also like to give another shout out. Connie couldn't make it today, but obviously she is a regular on our show. But also want to give a shout out to Alicia B. She keeps me in check. She's been a true supporter of mine. I believe she also helps Duty Ron, Dawn Marie. There's a bunch of names here. I'm still trying to figure them out. Patty. They're very supportive. They're behind the scenes giving me the questions and making sure we know. Now, when we do a live show, it's a collaborative effort. So again, at the very beginning, we kind of know what things should be, but we're still learning. So again, I'm going to start making sure that we do a little bit more research on certain things. But if we don't know something, we'll tell you, okay, we're a little unsure of this, and we'll make sure that we're a little bit more on point if we have to express something that we have specific knowledge in. So again, we're learning as we go. But with your help, there's nothing that we can't accomplish. Now, my show for this week coming up. Now, guys, if you're really interested in corrections, over 1,200 videos on here. And believe it or not, guys, you'll be shocked how much of the stuff that we talk about could apply anywhere in life. Ask Alicia. Alicia watches videos from that. You think it's just correctional based, but when you give it a dialogue and it's just me and Connie or me and Russ or me and Steve, and we're chatting, it's like, oh, shit, I can apply that to here. How to grow in corrections, or how to grow in your career. How not to get manipulated by an inmate, how not to get manipulated by your husband. Whatever the game may be, there's application there. And I think you'll find that there's good value in the videos and just a true understanding where you're not going to get it from anywhere else. It's good because there's this audience here. What I like about it is I remember a couple of days ago we did the show and people said, I didn't know that. And that to me is the biggest achievement we ever could do, because I would love to go to an event one day and people for the public for once thank the people who've never been thanked. I mean, how amazing would that be? Someone that knows what a correctional officer does, but never worked the profession, but trusts us in leading the way and letting you guys know. And then you finally go to that person who's never been thanked, who's never been recognized, who's never been appreciated, and just say, I know what you do. And that's not even just about us putting the content out. That's about you taking the time out of your life to sit down and break bread with us and get an understanding of what a world's like that most people will never see and never know. So having said that, so that's my giant thank you. Wednesday, I have a young lady coming on. She is young. She's going to talk about the dangers of having an inmate as a pen pal. She has a very interesting story of how she met an inmate, decided to be their pen pal, and staying with that inmate for 8 years and change while they were doing their sentence. She's going to tell you how conjugal visits worked, because in the state that she was dating the inmate, they were allowed conjugal visits. So she's going to tell you the process of conjugal visits. I know that there may be some interest in that, not because we're pervs, but there's going to be some interest in that, because she says she's been on shows before where people have asked about that. But here's the unique thing about it. The person that she fell in love with in the prison within 8 months was not the person. When he finally got released, in 8 months, that relationship came to an end, and it wasn't in the best of circumstances. So she fell in love with who she thought this person was, and the moment they got released, it was a pretty tough situation for her, which she's going to share. And you're going to see that story Wednesday. at 7 p.m. I'm sure Alicia's going to help me out with making sure we get some good questions out. And her name is Sharon Brooks. So if you're interested in seeing that, I don't know where it shows, but I have it scheduled up already. All you got to do is click the like and the reminder, and it'll let you know. And I'll probably have Connie. She's going to want to be involved in that dialogue. Now, for us, our dialogue is in the moment, but I'm going to start doing research more on cases. Russ is usually my guy for that. And I think we're going to have fun growing together. And yes, we're going to make mistakes, but at the end of the day, you learn from your mistakes and you become better. So I'm okay to make mistakes because I'm confident in my growth. So as always, guys, I truly love everyone here. Steve, Gary, Russ, of course, Duty Ron, and then everybody here that came and visited and stopped by. Shout out to Sandy Hassan as well. She was helping us out on the side, making sure that I got rid of some people that shouldn't have been in the comments. And as always, guys, stay safe. And we'll probably post a surprise one maybe over the weekend. We'll figure it out. But in the meantime, please stay safe and subscribe, hit the like, and let's get me to I would like to get to 100,000 one day. That's my goal because I want that silver play button. But in the meantime, I'd rather have one quality person than 100,000 bullshit. So I love the fact that I have this community and we're just growing. So I love you guys. Stay safe.